Mu Qing turned her head to the side at almost the exact same moment, and a peculiar look appeared on her face. There in the distance, a vast expanse of gray mist was visible, and it stretched for as far as the eyes could see. The white bones beneath this gray mist all rose up and formed skeletons of strange configurations. These skeletons weren't very large, but they had eyes that glowed with unsettling red eyes, and all of them turned their attention to the Earth Abyss army. In the blink of an eye, the gray mist had spread to an area that was quite close to the Earth Abyss beings. All of the low-grade demon beasts were becoming quite uneasy. Han Li's expression changed slightly, and he couldn't help but take a glance at Mu Qing, only to find that she remained completely calm and collected, as if she'd already predicted this well in advance. Just as Han Li was feeling rather perplexed, a low cry suddenly erupted from the rear. Two streaks of crimson light then shot forth from the puppets behind him, heading directly toward the oncoming gray mist. The two streaks of crimson light transformed into two gusts of crimson winds before crashing into the gray mist. A string of resounding booms rang out as the crimson winds and gray mist clashes, and both sides transformed into massive pillars of wind that rose straight up into the sky. As the gray mist and crimson winds intertwined, hordes of nearby skeletons were swept up and completely pulverized. However, the remaining troops in the skeletal army rose into the air with gray mist revolving around their bodies, hurtling toward the earthy abyss army at low altitudes. These skeletons filled up virtually the entire sky, and there were far too many of them to count. Han Li was feeling quite astonished upon seeing this. Right at this moment, the white-haired beauty at the front of the party let loose a strange cackle as she rotated on the spot. A massive ghostly shadow with disheveled hair abruptly appeared behind her, then grew to several thousand feet in size in the blink of an eye. The ghostly shadow suddenly opened its cavernous mouth to blast forth a burst of green chi, which swept up vast numbers of skeletons up above. A peculiar scene then ensued. As soon as the green chi came into contact with the skeletons, the gray mist around the skeletons' bodies dissipated, and they fell from the sky, having been completely dismantled. Furthermore, there seemed to be no end to the green chi emanating from the ghostly shadow's mouth, and in conjunction with the two gusts of crimson winds, they quickly eradicated the immense horde of skeletons. Thus, the crisis was averted even without the need for intervention from Mu Qing and Liu Zhu. And Li couldn't help but draw a sharp breath upon seeing this. When the crimson gusts of wind disappeared, the two crimson-robed figures flew back as two streaks for crimson light. The green chi then dissipated, following which the massive ghostly shadow behind the white-haired beauty also vanished in a flash. Those were just some yinbon monsters. They're the easiest beings to deal with in the infernal river. The things that we encounter next won't be so easy to ward off, Mu Qing suddenly murmured. She seemed to be speaking to herself, but also disclosing information to the nearby Han Li and Jin Ling, both of whom glanced at one another upon hearing this. A contemplative expression had appeared on Han Li's face, but Jin Ling's furry face remained completely emotionless. The party continued onward under Liu Zhu's command. 2 days later, hordes of strange crimson bats appeared in the air over a crimson swamp, and they began to attack the Earth Abyss demon beasts in a frenzy. Even after being torn apart or slain by the Earth Abyss demon beasts, their bodies would simply reform again and completely recover, only by killing them a few more times or incinerating them into nothingness with fire attribute techniques where they truly killed. As soon as they latched onto the body of an Earth Abyss demon beast, they would gulp down large mouthfuls of blood essence, and it would only take a few gulps to reduce their prey to a shriveled-up corpse. Some of these bats were as large as several tens of feet in size, while the smallest ones were only several feet long. The largest dozen or so bats among them had human faces and bat bodies, and they were capable of blasting crimson light out of their mouths. Any demon beast that was struck by this crimson light would instantly be reduced to dust. In fact, this light was so formidable that even high-grade demon beasts weren't able to take a blast head-on. As such, not only did all of the demon beasts spring into action to retaliate, even the 4 demon monarchs had unleashed their abilities to kill those human-faced bats. Han Li had enshrouded himself in arcs of golden lightning, and the crimson bats would be reduced to clouds of crimson chi as soon as they came into contact with this lightning. At this point, he finally understood why all the demon monarchs held his divine devilbane lightning in such high regard. The majority of ghostly beings in the infernal river were imbued with devilish chi, so his divine devilbane lightning was extremely effective against them. The Earth Abyss army was attacked by a vast number of these crimson bats, but through the retaliation from the four demon monarchs, the demon beast, the puppets, and the profound ghosts, the number of bats rapidly dwindled until there were barely any left. The remaining 2 or 3 human-faced bats could clearly tell that their situation had turned into quite a perilous one, and blood mist erupted from their bodies as they fled into the distance. At the astonishing speed at which they flew, they disappeared into the distance in just a few flashes. 7 days later, within a vast expanse of strange blue mist, countless black ghostly shadows took on different shapes and forms as they danced around the Earth Abyss demon beasts at the foot of the mountain. Even though they refrained from approaching the Earth Abyss army, all of them were capable of letting loose extremely unsettling ghostly cries that caused the low-grade demon beasts to sway unsteadily as their eyes glazed over, looking as if they could collapse at any moment. At this moment, a large black bell flew forth from within the Earth Abyss army, and following just a single toll of the bell, most of the ghostly shadows were vanquished, while the remaining ones screeched with anguish and horror as they disappeared into the mist. A month later, in the air above a black lake, a 3-headed giant with rotten green flesh all over its body stood atop the surface of the lake, wielding a massive beastbone club with its hands as it engaged in battle with a purple-blood puppet, which was comparable in size to itself. Nearby, countless ghostly beings had emerged from within the lake to battle the Earth Abyss demon beasts. At this point, there were only less than 10,000 remaining Earth Abyss demon beasts, and most of them were high-grade beings. Even the ghostly soldiers and puppets had suffered severe casualties. On a certain day a month later, and Lee raised a hand, and golden light flashed as a minotaur ghost before him was instantly sliced in half. Gray light then swept forth from behind him, sweeping toward a few oncoming bone arrows, and those arrows immediately disappeared without a trace. At the same time, he pressed a palm against the air and 5 colored glacial flames erupted forth, reducing the 2 sinister ghosts that had appeared behind him to a pair of ice sculptures. Right at this moment, a gust of howling winds came crashing down from above. Han Li's expression changed slightly, and his body blurred as she disappeared on the spot. A massive mace that was over 100 feet in length struck the spot where Han Li had been standing a split second ago, and black light flashed as a huge crater that was several tens of feet deep was smashed into the ground. The wielder of the mace was a giant cyclops corpse with green fur all over its body, and it looked around with its single eye with a perplexed expression. All of a sudden, azure light flashed in the air above the giant corpse, and Han Li appeared before pressing a palm downward. A small black mountain appeared out of thin air, before transforming into a massive mountain of over 10,000 feet as black light swirled around it. Following a resounding boom, the black mountain crushed the giant corpse and also pulverized all of the other ghostly beings in a radius of over 1,000 feet. Han Li heaved a sigh of relief, and only then did he get a chance to catch his breath as well as to survey his surroundings. There were ghostly chi and murky mist surging in all directions, and even with his bright-sight spirit eyes, he only had visibility for up to just over 10,000 feet. Letter 1D5F3, letter 1D69B, letter 1D68T, letter 1D680, letter 1D604, letter 1D556, letter 1D5F0, letter 1D560, letter 1D46. He could only tell from the astonishing flashes of spiritual light and the relentless resounding explosions that there were many Earth Abyss demons still locked in arduous combat against this ghostly army. However, he didn't know where the 4 demon monarchs were, nor whether they'd been surrounded by the infernal river ghosts. A wry smile appeared on Han Li's face. During the preceding month, the first dozen or so days were filled with battles, but the going was relatively good, and they made fast progress. However, in the second half of the month, they passed through a dozen or so areas inhabited by powerful ghosts with special abilities. Even the 4 demon monarchs were wary of such beings, and they had refined the 8,000 ghostly soldiers and over 10,000 puppets in advance to try and force their way through these areas. As for the low-grade demon beasts, there were almost none left in the aftermath of the previous battles. Liu Zhu and the others had already anticipated that this would happen, but they were still feeling rather uneasy. However, it was certainly far too late for them to turn back, so they could only continue onward, making sure to take any extra precautions that they could. On this day, the army arrived at a set of highlands that Mu Qing proclaimed didn't house any powerful ghostly beings. All of a sudden, countless ghostly soldiers converged toward them from all sides, and there were so many of them that it was as if the entire heaven and earth had been dominated by their presence. They were led by over 30 spatial tempering stage ghostly generals, and they unleashed dense yin mist in unison, surrounding the Earth Abyss army and taking them by surprise to scatter their entire formation. As a result, everyone was forced to fight on their own. In the beginning, Han Li worked together with Jin Ling and the other Earth Abyss demon beasts nearby to ward off the attacks from these ghostly beings. But this yin mist had an extremely unsettling property, where one would immediately lose all sense of direction after straying even slightly too far away from their companions. As such, even with Han Li's powerful spiritual sense and bright-eyed spirit eyes, he still lost contact with everyone else after over half a day of intense battle. He could only indistinctly hear the sound of battle being waged in the distance, and there were still hordes of ghostly beings charging toward him without any fear of death. Thankfully, even though there was an immense number of these ghostly beings, they were only at the nascent soul and deity transformation stages at best, and they weren't able to pose any real threat to him. After battling for a while longer, he finally managed to kill all of the ghostly beings in the surrounding area, thereby earning him a brief period of respite. However, he knew that it wouldn't take long for a new horde of ghostly beings to swarm to attack him again, and there were simply far too many of them to kill. An indecisive look appeared on Han Li's face for a moment, following which he suddenly made a grabbing motion downward, and the massive black mountain disappeared in a flash. He then shot forth, as a streak of azure light toward the direction where the sounds of battle were the least intense. He had to fly out of this mist to ensure self-preservation before worrying about anything else. If worse came to worse, even though he was wary of the demon monarchs, he'd simply have to release his weeping soul beast and force his way out. Otherwise, there was a very real possibility that he could eventually be worn down and killed by these endless hordes of ghostly beings. Almost in the exact instant that Han Li flew into the distance, another group of sinister ghosts with crimson bodies and green hair charged out from the nearby mist, only to be completely dumbfounded by the lack of targets to attack. At this point, Han Li was already over 10,000 feet away, and through the use of his spirit eyes, he was able to avoid several large-scale battles in succession as he attempted to fly out of this mist. If he encountered a small group of ghostly beings, then he'd kill them on the spot. Conversely, if he encountered large hordes of them, then he'd take evasive measures instead. Thus, Han Li managed to traverse relatively smoothly through the yin mist. However, it didn't take long before Han Li lost all sense of direction. As such, he could only take a risk to fly higher up into the air and ascertain his position from a higher vantage point. Thus, he flew to altitudes of several thousand feet, where the mist was slightly thinner, but he was immediately beset with countless attacks that rained down from above. Thankfully, he had prepared his divine essence-effused light in advance, and he hurriedly swept aside most of these attacks with his divine essence-effused light. Otherwise, he would have most likely been forced to plummet straight to the ground. Even so, he had still been given a massive fright. Before the next wave of attacks could arrive, he flew back down into the denser mist again. It appeared that it would be impossible for him to fly up to an altitude that would make a substantial difference in his situation. As such, he could only decide on a certain direction and plunge headfirst into the mist. However, it was either the case that this mist had been imbued with some kind of profound restriction, or it truly did cover an extraordinarily vast area. In any case, even after several hours, he was still trapped within the mist without any signs of being close to the edge. Han Li's expression was growing darker as time passed by. He swept a sleeve through the air, and several golden threads shot forth, instantly slicing in the ghostly shadows before him into several pieces. However, those ghostly shadows merely recovered amid a burst of unsettling howls before pouncing toward Han Li again. Han Li harumphed coldly as he opened his mouth to blast forth a ball of silver flames. The fireball then exploded into several smaller fireballs, completely incinerating the ghostly shadows into nothingness amid cries of anguish. These formless ghosts were rather difficult to deal with for normal cultivators, but they were naturally completely powerless in the face of Han Li's spirit engulfing heavenly flames. After eradicating this wave of ghostly beings, Han Li looked up and was just about to decide on a direction to fly toward when an earth-shattering boom suddenly erupted from another direction, and even the nearby ground tremored violently as a result. Ball of black flames shot forth in all directions in the distance, and an indistinct female cry of shock and fury could be heard. Han Li's expression faltered slightly as he turned toward that direction. That voice was rather familiar. It seemed to belong to Yuan Yao. Could it be that she was engaged in battle here? Even though Han Li couldn't be sure of this, he still flew toward that direction as a streak of azure light after a brief pause for contemplation. The black fireballs hadn't exploded very far away from Han Li, so it only took him moments to cover the distance of tens of thousands of feet as a streak of azure light, thereby arriving near the area. Letter 1D4F, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D658, letter 1D498, letter 1D4E, letter 1D4FF, letter 1D658, letter 1D4F8, letter 1D662. Han Li focused his gaze up ahead, upon which his expression changed slightly. Over 1,000 feet away from him, there were several hundred crimson skeletons with disproportionately massive and thin and long limbs shooting one crimson arrow after another, surrounding and attack over 100 yin armor profound ghosts. At the center of these profound ghosts, two black-robed women stood, one with a small black vial in her hand, while the other was wielding a black banana leaf fan. They were unleashing balls of black flames with those treasures to assist the ghostly soldiers, trying to keep the barrage of attacks from the crimson skeletons at bay with all their might. The black flames were quite powerful, and the long weapons being wielded by the yin armor profound ghosts were certainly nothing to be scoffed at either, but their opponents were even more bizarre. Not only were these skeletons able to leap astonishing distances like grasshoppers, they moved like the wind, and the crimson arrows they unleashed seemed to be able to somewhat repress the black flames as well as the yin winds from the weapons of the profound ghosts. With several hundred skeletons attacking in unison, most of the black flames were forcibly doused before even reaching their targets. Even the skeletons that were struck by stray wisps of these black flames merely stumbled and slowed down slightly, but they didn't appear to have been severely injured at all. Meanwhile, these crimson arrows were also very effective against the yin armor profound ghosts. The black suits of armor worn by these ghostly soldiers had certain defensive properties, but after being struck by about a dozen arrows, the armor would undoubtedly be shattered, and the ghostly soldier would also dissipate as balls of black chi. By the time Han Li had reached the scene, the two black-robed women were desperately unleashing the powers of their treasures, and 7 or 8 more of the ghostly soldiers around them were felled in the blink of an eye. Their situation was a very perilous one. These two women were naturally none other than Yuan Yao and Yan Li. Han Li narrowed his eyes to inspect his surroundings, but didn't discover any other powerful ghosts lurking nearby. Thus, he stepped in without any further hesitation. He flapped his wings and abruptly disappeared on the spot, appearing in the air above the two women in the next instant. He swept his sleeve through the air, and 72 golden flying swords shot forth, transforming into several hundred streaks of golden sword chi that rained down in a torrential downpour. Any crimson skeletons that were struck by the sword chi were sliced into countless pieces like a hot knife through butter. However, an extremely harrowing scene then immediately ensued. Crimson light flashed from the surface of the remains of all of the crimson skeletons, and they all disintegrated into balls of blood-like liquid. They then converged to form a massive, vibrant, red ghostly being. Han Li raised his eyebrows upon seeing this, and he raised a pristine white hand before thrusting his pal toward the giant crimson ghost that was slowly taking shape. All of a sudden, 5 large skeleton progesitins appeared above his fingertips, following which a vast expanse of 5-colored glacial flames came crashing down. As soon as the glacial flames inundated the giant crimson ghost, it was transformed into a huge ice sculpture and was completely immobilized as a result. Han Li then flicked a finger to send forth an arc of golden lightning that struck the ice sculpture amid a loud thunderclap. The ice sculpture was instantly shattered by the arc of lightning, and the massive ghostly being was slain before it even had a chance to unleash any of its powers. Yuan Yao and Yan Li had witnessed everything from down below, and their mouths had gaped open with shock. These ghostly beings had almost been the death of them, yet Han Li had eradicated all of them in virtually the blink of an eye. That was downright astonishing to them. Yan Li was the first one to recover her composure, and she hurriedly extended a curtsy toward Han Li with a smile on her face. "Thank you for saving us, Brother Han." The astonishment on Yuan Yao's face was also replaced by a gorgeous smile that resembled the beauty of countless exuberant flowers blossoming at once. "If you'd come here any later, we'd most likely have been dead already, Brother Han." Even Han Li was slightly entranced by her smile, but he quickly composed himself before asking, "Why are the two of you here? Weren't you with one of the demon monarchs? And what about these ghostly soldiers?" Or an O with Fairy Mu Ching as well, Brother Han. We were separated in the same way that you were separated from everyone else. As for these yin armor profound ghosts, the two of us participated in their refinement process, so we're able to control some of them. However, these are all that's left of the profound ghosts under our control, and it was all thanks to their protection that we were able to survive to this point, Yan Li explained with a smile. This ambush was most likely led by a ghostly being with an extremely high level of intelligence. Otherwise, there was no way that such a massive and organized trap could have been sprung. They clearly want to kill all of us in one fell swoop, Han Li said with a nod of his head. Yuan Yao's face paled slightly, and she chewed down on her lower lip before asking, "Your analysis is quite plausible, Brother Han. What do you intend to do now? We've been surrounded by far too many ghostly beings for us to kill." Han Li didn't give a direct reply. Instead, a peculiar look appeared on his face as he said, "Have you not noticed? Up to this point, we've only encountered low-grade and mid-grade ghostly beings, but we haven't even seen a single high-grade ghost." "What you're saying is," Yan Li faltered slightly before catching the gist of Han Li's words. "That's right, those spatial tempering stage ghostly beings are most likely busy battling Liu Zhu and the others. Otherwise, even if just a few of them were to appear, we'd be in severe danger," Han Li mused as he stroked his chin. "What are you trying to say, Brother Han? Please make yourself clearer," Yuan Yao prompted. "I simply think that the situation is not looking very good, and it's also quite chaotic, but at the same time, it also presents to us a brilliant opportunity to get away from the demon monarchs," Han Li said in a slow voice. "So what you're suggesting is..." Yan Li's smile faded and was replaced by a grim expression. "That's right. If we can get out of this place, then the demon monarchs won't be able to come after us. We just have to find a place where pure yin qi has materialized so we can wipe away the tracking marks in my body. With the size of the infernal river, even if the demon monarchs try to come after us, it'd be like searching for a needle in a haystack," Han Li proposed. Yuan Yao and Yan Li glanced at one another, and both of them were quite tempted by this proposition. After holding a brief discussion through voice transmission, the two women finally made up their minds. "All right, we'll do as you say, Brother Han. Here in this infernal river, the two of us are in constant peril, and we'd also like nothing better than to get away from these demon monarchs." A hint of elation flashed through Han Li's eyes, but he quickly furrowed his brows in with concern again. "Now that we're on the same page, the first hurdle in our way is this ghostly mist. I've been searching for a way out for hours to no avail." "You're troubled by this ghostly mist, Brother Han. With our pitiful powers, we wouldn't be able to provide assistance in many other areas, but don't forget that Junior Martial Sister Yuan and I are using Ghost Dao cultivation arts, and we also possess semi-ghostly bodies." Yan Li chuckled upon hearing this. Han Li faltered slightly initially before his expression lit up with elation. "Are you saying you have a way to get out of this place, fellow Taoist Yan? The yin-yang reincarnation arts that we're cultivating may not be extremely useful in battle, but it's provided us with many other abilities. All you have to do is follow us, and we'll lead you out of this ghostly mist." In reality, we were planning to escape from this mist as well, but we were unable to do so as we kept on being attacked by ghostly beings, Yuan Yao explained with a slightly smug expression on her face. Han Li repressed the excitement in his heart as he said, "It wouldn't be wise to delay any longer, so let's leave right away. Otherwise, we're only going to be attacked by more of those ghostly beings." The two women had no objections to this, and they immediately departed with what remained of their ghostly soldiers. Along the way, Yuan Yao and Yan Li gathered together, holding hands mid-flight as they began to chant something in unison. Black and white spiritual light then flashed from their bodies, following which they opened their mouths to expel a bead each, one of which was black while the other was white. The two beads then combined as one to form a fist-sized black and white eyeball. Meanwhile, Yan Li and Yuan Yao both closed their eyes, but the black and white eyeball glanced around at their surroundings before immediately leading the trio toward a certain direction. Han Li was a little skeptical of this strange secret technique, but he could only follow the two women. "Brother Han, using our Ghost Dao secret technique, we'll be able to escape this ghostly mist, but we can't change directions along the way. Otherwise, all of our prior efforts would go to waste," Yan Li suddenly cautioned. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and he asked, "Does that mean that if we encounter any other ghostly beings along the way, we'll have to force our way through them?" "That's right. Now you should know why we were still unable to escape from this mist even with this secret technique," Yan Li replied with a wry smile. HMPH, as long as we don't encounter any beings of the same caliber as the demon monarchs, we'll just have to crash right through them. All of the truly powerful ghostly beings should be engaged in battle with the demon monarchs anyway, so we shouldn't encounter any substantial obstacles, Han Li chuckled coldly. Even though Yan Li had seen Han Li in action not long ago, she was still surprised by how confident he was, and a peculiar look appeared on her face. Han Li immediately identified the skepticism in her eyes and asked, "Do you think I'm being overconfident, fellow Taoist Yan?" "That's not the case. I'm not overly familiar with you, but I've heard on countless occasions from my junior martial sister about your ability to easily slay beings of the same cultivation base in the human world." Yan Li chuckled with pursed lips. Han Li was rather surprised to hear this, and he cast a glance at Yuan Yao just in time to see a faint blush appear on her cheeks. Han Li fell silent thereafter. "Fellow Taoist Han, for you to be so confident surely indicates that your powers are comparable to that of a spatial tempering stage being, right?" Yan Li asked. "As long as we don't encounter any late spatial tempering stage beings, I can put up a fight," Han Li replied calmly. This was not the time for excessive modesty, so he merely told the truth. Tusk, I really don't understand how you were able to cultivate your abilities. Back when junior martial sister Yuan and I first met you, you were still a chi condensation cultivator, yet you're now as powerful as spatial tempering stage beings. When I think about it, it feels like I'm in a dream." Yan Li clicked her tongue with wonder. "Why do you sound so sad, fellow Taoist Yan?" Han Li asked. "Not really, it's just that both my junior martial sister and I cultivated the yin-yang reincarnation arts, and I'm not sure whether this is a blessing or a curse, nor how we're supposed to progress in our future cultivation. Will we be forced to convert ourselves completely into ghostly beings and forgo our humanity just to further our cultivation path?" Yan Li heaved a forlorn sigh. Yuan Yao's expression also became rather downcast upon hearing this. Han Li's brows furrowed, and he was silent for a moment before speaking again. "I don't know much about ghost Dao cultivation arts, but what I do know is that the spirit realm is a land of miracles. Even those without spiritual roots can attain them here, and as long as you two haven't completely become ghostly beings, there should be a way to recover your former bodies given the countless incredible secret techniques in the spirit realm." "Is that true? Is there really a way for us to return to our former bodies in the spirit realm?" Both Yuan Yao and Yan Li were ecstatic to hear this. "Your yin-yang reincarnation arts are indeed quite unique, but I don't think it's an irreversible cultivation art. If I'm not mistaken, you too should be able to recover your former human bodies as long as you dissipate the yin-qi within your bodies. However, the process will most likely be quite painful and arduous, and your cultivation bases will most likely be damaged as well. As for the specific method to accomplish this, it's best to do some thorough research on the matter after we return to human race territory," Han Li said in a meaningful voice. "If we can recover our former human bodies, having to endure some pain and sacrifice some of our cultivation bases is nothing," Yuan Yao replied in a resolute manner. Yan Li also nodded in agreement. Han Li smiled in response, yet just as he was about to say something else, his expression abruptly darkened as he disappeared into the mist up ahead as a streak of azure light. The two women faltered momentarily before glancing at one another. Moments later, ghostly howls erupted from the mist up ahead, following which a dozen or so streaks of gray yin-qi burst into the air. However, the commotion abruptly subsided after a few streaks of golden sword qi vanquished these streaks of yin-qi. Han Li then returned to the two women as a streak of azure light. "Let's keep going. Those were just a few ordinary ghostly beings," Han Li said in a calm manner. "Ordinary?" Yan Li and Yuan Yao were both completely speechless. They weren't able to witness the battle that had just taken place due to the dense mist in their path, but those streaks of yin-qi were extremely powerful and clearly not something normal ghostly beings were capable of unleashing. The fact that Han Li was able to vanquish them so easily further cemented their belief in him. Thus, they continued to focus on controlling the eyeball they'd conjured up, searching for the correct route to take. Along the way, all of the ghostly beings they encountered were slain in mere moments by Han Li. They'd even stumbled upon a few relative large-scale battles between the Earth, Abyss demon beasts, and other ghostly beings. But Han Li was still able to lay waste to those ghostly beings in what seemed like the blink of an eye to carve out a path. The two women and the remaining ghostly soldiers continued onward. The Earth Abyss demon beasts had thought that their saviors had arrived, only for Han Li's trio to quickly disappear into the distance, and after a brief period of dumbstruck inactivity, they could only continue to fight for their lives. Han Li's trio enjoyed relatively look along their journey, encountering no troublesome ghosts, nor large hordes of ghostly beings, thereby allowing them to progress in a smooth manner. Several hours later, the mist around them finally began to thin out, and the ghostly beings they encountered also became fewer and far in between. Han Li and the others were naturally ecstatic to see this. They knew that they'd taken the right route and were close to the edge of the mist. After slaying a few more ghostly beings, Han Li was just about to lead the two women and the ghostly soldiers on a final charge when his expression suddenly changed, and he abruptly came to a halt as a grim expression appeared on his face. Yuan Yao's heart jolted upon seeing this, and she asked, "What is it, Brother Han?" Yan Li also looked on with bewilderment in her eyes. Unfortunately, their spiritual sense was rather limited, so they weren't able to glean the scenes up ahead. "Looks like leaving this place won't be so easy after all," Han Li replied expressionlessly. Right at this moment, a female giggling voice suddenly sounded from within the thin mist up ahead. The giggling grew louder and louder, reaching them in the blink of an eye and ringing out in all directions. Yan Li and Yuan Yao initially paid no heed to this. After all, with their semi-ghostly bodies, such simple ghost Dao captivation techniques wouldn't be able to harm them in the slightest. However, within moments from when the laughter first erupted around them, the two women were suddenly struck by a sense of feebleness, and their eyelids drooped as if they'd suddenly become countless times heavier. Yuan Yao reacted quite quickly, forcibly retaining a hint of clarity in her mind to try and repress this debilitating sensation. However, when she tried to summon the yin power within her body, her heart immediately sank as panic surged through her heart. She discovered that there wasn't a single trace of yin power left for her to draw upon. What's going on? Yuan Yao knew that her current condition definitely had something to do with what giggling female voice, but the overwhelming wave of sleepiness was too much for her to resist. Her eyes slowly fell shut, and her body swayed as if she were about to collapse at any moment. Yan Li was in the same boat, and some of the yin armor profound ghosts had even dropped their weapons before plummeting from the sky. HMPH, a cold harumph suddenly sounded from beside them. Even though the voice wasn't very loud, it was particularly clear to the two women, and both of them felt a sharp pain in their spiritual sense in unison. The two of them shivered as their drowsiness completely faded, and at the same time, yin power began to surge through their bodies. Yuan Yao was elated to have to escape that ordeal, and she immediately summoned a protective layer of gray spiritual light around her body. She turned to discover that Yan Li had done the same thing, and even the profound ghosts that were falling out of the sky were rising into the air again. Yuan Yao heaved a sigh of relief before turning to Han Li, who remained as still and stalwart as a mountain. It was quite clear that he was the one who had saved them from that crisis. At this moment, Han Li stood in a completely expressionless manner, completely unaffected by the ghostly giggling around him. All of a sudden, blue light flashed through his eyes, and he abruptly swept a sleeve through the air, sending a streak of sword chi hurtling toward a certain spot in the air. A faint white shadow suddenly appeared in the spot where the golden sword chi had just passed through. The white shadow twisted its body slightly, and the sword chi flashed past without inflicting any harm to it. Han Li's expression changed slightly as one of his hands turned black while the other turned white, and he thrust his palms through the air like lightning. A vast expanse of gray light and a burst of 5-colored flames immediately appeared out of thin air above the white shadow, then swept downward in unison. The two powers created an inescapable net that afforded the white shadow no avenue for evasion. Yuan Yao and Yan Li were elated to see this. They witnessed Han Li unleash these two abilities on multiple occasions, and all of the ghostly beings that had been struck by them had been instantly eradicated. However, the scenes that unfolded next caused their expressions to stiffen. The white shadow let loose a low chuckle before splitting into 4 parts, then further dividing into 8 parts. In the blink of an eye, faint white shadows had appeared all over that area, and they were still multiplying relentlessly as if there were no end to them, and many of those white shadows had appeared outside the area enshrouded under the gray light and 5-colored flames. Yuan Yao and Yan Li glanced at one another upon seeing this, only to find their own astonishment mirrored in each other's eyes. Han Li's pupils contracted upon seeing this, but he quickly made a hand seal, and the gray light, as well as the 5-colored flames, suddenly dispersed, transforming into countless gray threads and streaks of fiery five-colored light that rained down from above. The white shadows that were struck by those attacks instantly vanished, but the remaining white shadows continued to multiply relentlessly. Gray threads and five-colored light encompassed most of the entire sky, but the white shadows simply refused to be completely exterminated. Not only were Yuan Yao and Yan Li stunned to see this, even Han Li was a little dumbstruck. However, right at this moment, his spiritual sense detected something, and his body blurred as he turned around in a flash to face behind him. He then fixed his gaze on a patch of empty space nearby, and a cold expression flashed through his eyes as a gash appeared on his glabella. The gash split open, following which a black eyeball emerged from within. It was none than his law-destruction eye. Having been nurtured for so many years, the eyeball had become darker and darker, and at this point, the mere sight of it made the beholder feel as if their soul were being sucked out of their bodies. Black light flashed deep within the eyeball, following which a pillar of light as thick as a human thumb shot forth, then disappeared into that patch of space in a flash. A resounding boom erupted, and the nearby space twisted and warped. Immediately thereafter, a black ball of light that was several tens of feet in radius appeared out of thin air, then disappeared in a flash. At the same time, a white shadow stumbled out of that patch of empty space, then hurtled back to over 100 feet away. At this point, the white shadow was no longer as blurry and indistinct as it had been before. Instead, its appearance had become very clear. It was a woman dressed in a set of white robes. The robe was shimmering with light and completely pristine and spotless, seemingly having remained completely unscathed in the aftermath of that explosion. The woman herself was quite tall and slender with a curvaceous body and a head of glossy black hair. Due to the fact that she had her head lowered, Han Li was unable to glean her true features, but she appeared to be quite a beauty. Han Li appraised this woman through narrowed eyes, and a wary expression appeared on his face. He had just attempted to sweep his spiritual sense toward her, only to have it repelled by her white robes, thereby thwarting his attempt to ascertain her cultivation base. However, he could tell from that previous clash that this was most definitely not some kind of normal high-grade ghostly being. Just as the woman had been forced out of space by Han Li's law-destruction eye, the white shadows on the other end that were relentlessly multiplying finally all disappeared. Han Li waved a hand without even turning his head, and the gray light along with the five-colored flames in that direction also vanished. A burst of unsettling giggles suddenly escaped from the woman's mouth, and she raised an arm before grabbing the air toward Han Li in a seemingly harmless gesture. However, her arm along with the sleeve of the white robe abruptly disappeared amid a flash of white light. Han Li couldn't help but falter slightly upon seeing this, but before he had figured out what was going on, the arm that had just vanished suddenly reappeared right in front of him. The sleeve on the arm was rolled up, revealing a set of white bony claws that flashed over to Han Li's neck as if by instantaneous teleportation, then made a vicious grab for his throat. Cold light of around an inch in length shimmered from the tips of each of the five claws. Arg! Even Han Li was given a massive fright by this sudden turn of events, and the claws were far too fast for him to evade or defend himself against. Thus, the bony claws grabbed onto Han Li's throat amid a dull thump, but in the instant that they made contact with his skin, golden light flashed from Han Li's neck of its own accord, following which a few golden scales appeared. The sharp bone claws were repelled amid a flash of golden light. Han Li also stumbled back a couple of steps, but thankfully, his throat remained completely unscathed, having been protected by those golden scales. A thunderous expression appeared on Han Li's face as he rapidly swept a sleeve through the air, sending forth a streak of golden light that instantly swept up the white arm. Golden light flashed as the entire arm was completely inundated by streaks of sword chi. The golden sword chi struck the arm with all their might, but they were only able to cause a few ripples to appear on the white sleeve of the robe, while the arm itself remained completely unscathed. Han Li's expression changed slightly, and he immediately opened his mouth to blast forth a ball of silver flames. However, it was too late. The white-robed woman had recovered from the shock of her failed attack, and she shrugged her shoulder, upon which the white arm that had been detached from her body abruptly disappeared, leaving the silver fireball to strike nothing but empty air. At the same time, white light flashed by the white-robed woman's side, and her arm returned to her body. Han Li took a deep breath upon seeing this before rustling a sleeve, and 4 or 5 azure beads rolled soundlessly into his hand. At the same time, spiritual light flashed from his wrist, and a palm-sized spirit beast bracelet appeared in his other hand. This ghostly possessed extremely bizarre and troublesome abilities, and Han Li didn't want to take any further risks. As such, he was planning to immediately summon his weeping soul beast, then assist the beast by attacking the white-robed woman with his lightning beads to end this battle as quickly as possible. This was not a time where he could afford lengthy delays. The white-robed woman seemed to have realized that Han Li was quite a formidable opponent, and she wasn't in a hurry to attack again. Instead, she slowly raised her head to reveal her true appearance. Arg! Yan Li and Yuan Yao had just been flabbergasted by the rapid series of blows traded between Han Li and the white-robed woman, and both of them suddenly let loose involuntary cries of surprise upon seeing the woman's true appearance. Han Li also drew a sharp breath at the sight of her facial features. An extremely terrifying half of a face was laid out before his eyes. One half of the face was covered in shriveled, eerie green skin, while the other half of the face was comprised of fair, delicate skin and half of a pair of supple red lips, the kind that one would expect from an exquisite beauty. The ghostly being's eyes were both green and completely emotionless, appraising Han Li in a cold manner. If this face had been present on some kind of sinister, ghostly being with a hideous body, then it wouldn't have been much of a shock. However, this woman possessed an extremely seductive figure with a head of flowing, gorgeous hair, creating the illusion that she was a fine beauty. As such, the stark contrast between expectations and reality naturally sent a bone-chilling sensation running down the beholder's spine. Low, ghostly sobs suddenly sounded from the white-robed woman's body, and clouds of white mist began to surface in the nearby area. These clouds of mist contained all types of ghostly figures, some of which were baring their fangs in a menacing display, some of which were letting loose ferocious roars, and all of them were putting on menacing displays. Han Li's heart jolted with shock. An azure light flashed from his spirit beast bracelet as he sprang into action to summon his weeping soul beast. However, an earth-shattering roar suddenly erupted deep within the mist at this moment, and the roar was so thunderously loud that Han Li's ears were ringing in its aftermath. Even the clouds of ghostly mist were surging erratically from that explosive roar, and the two women accompanying Han Li were completely petrified. That voice didn't belong to any of the four demon monarchs, so there was most likely some other powerful ghostly being nearby. Han Li's expression darkened as that thought occurred to him, yet before he had a chance to formulate a plan, an inexplicable turn of events suddenly unfolded. As soon as the white-robed woman heard this roar, green light flashed from within her eyes, and the ghostly weeping emanating from her body abruptly cut off. Following a brief hesitation, the white mist around its body quickly swept toward it as a gust of white winds, and it hurtled directly toward the direction where the roar had erupted from. Li naturally wasn't going to chase down this opponent, but his eyes were flashing with indecision as he cast his gaze toward the direction where the thunderous roar had just erupted from. "Brother Han, what should we?" Yan Li couldn't help want to ask something, but Han Li immediately cut her off. "Let's get out of here as quickly as we can. It's quite possible that one of the demon monarchs is nearby. Otherwise, that ghostly woman wouldn't have dropped everything to go and assist her companion." Yuan Yao and Yan Li found this to be quite a plausible theory, and the trio immediately flew away along with the ghostly soldiers. On this occasion, no more ghostly beings appeared to hinder them, and the mist up ahead was thinning at a noticeable rate. 2 hours later, the three of them finally emerged from the mist. All three of them were ecstatic to see this, and they immediately prepared to fly away into the distance. However, right at this moment, an unfamiliar male voice suddenly sounded from high above them. I didn't think that anyone would be able to make it out of my restriction. Looks like I underestimated your abilities." Han Li and the others were all shocked to hear this, and they raised their heads in unison, upon which all three of them were stunned by what they saw. In the air over 10,000 feet above the nearby ghostly mist, there were two groups of beings locked in a tense confrontation. One of those groups was comprised of none other than the white-haired beauty and Mu Qing, as well as a dozen or so high-grade demon beasts and the 8-yin armor ghost monarchs. There were thousands of ghostly soldiers situated further away, and they were all organized in an orderly formation as gusts of yin winds and bursts of baleful qi erupted into the air around them. However, they were faced with several times the number of beings they had on their side, comprising an army of around 7,000 to 8,000. All of these beings were around 20 feet tall and were clad in suits of crimson armor. They were wielding all types of weapons such as sabers, spears, swords, halberds, bows, and crossbows, and all of them hovered completely motionlessly in midair, clearly indicating that this was an exceptionally well-trained army. What was even more surprising to Han Li was that there were over 100 azure war carriages among this crimson army. These war carriages appeared to be rather antiquated, with azure light flashing erratically over their surfaces. There were a dozen or so crimson-armored beings on each carriage, all of which were wielding long weapons. There were two strange black beasts with lion heads and worm bodies drawing each carriage, and they were also clad in suits of armor. At the forefront of the army were three generals seated atop different beastly steeds. The one who had just spoken was a man in a suit of purple armor with a pair of golden war hammers strapped to his back. Mu Qing and the white-haired beauty also turned their attention toward Han Li's trio. The white-haired beauty remained completely motionless, making it impossible to glean her thoughts, but Mu Qing wore a hint of a smile on her face, and Han Li's heart jolted upon seeing this as he lamented his terrible luck. Yuan Yao and Yan Li's faces immediately paled at the sight of the white-haired woman. "Oh, so there's a couple of semi-ghostly beings among the three of you. No wonder you were able to emerge from my restriction." The purple-armored general was somehow able to immediately identify Yuan Yao and Yan Li's constitutions, and he lost interest in them as a result. He then turned his attention toward Han Li, and the latter was immediately struck by a bone-chilling burst of spiritual sense sweeping toward him, attempting to completely see through his entire being. Han Li's brows furrowed as he activated his great development technique to repel most of the armored general's spiritual sense. At the same time, he also swept his spiritual sense toward the man. As a result, Han Li's expression changed slightly as he discovered that the body of armored general was extremely cold and was not a body of flesh and blood, but there was no yin ghost energy within it either. He then swept his spiritual sense toward the other two generals as well as the crimson-armored soldiers behind them, and he discovered that aside from the carriage-drawing beasts, all of them were also completely devoid of life. "These are puppets." Han Li was shocked as he arrived at this verdict. These puppets seemed to have already controlled the ghostly beings of the infernal river. Setting aside the crimson-armored soldiers, the three armored generals each had different auras, and they'd most likely been possessed by the souls of extremely powerful beings. Furthermore, the fact that the two demon monarchs hadn't attacked these puppets yet was a clear indication that both sides were evenly matched. Otherwise, such an impasse couldn't be maintained, as the two women would have destroyed their opponents already. Liu Zhu and Dai Zhu weren't present, so they were presumably still trapped within the ghostly mist, battling the powerful ghost that had unleashed that thunderous roar earlier. "Get over here." Mu Qing suddenly waved a hand toward Han Li. There was certainly no chance for them to escape in this situation, so Han Li could only do as he told, flying over to the two demon monarchs before cupping his fist in a respectful salute. "I pay my respects to my two seniors." "Fellow Taoist Han, why isn't Jin Ling with you? Where is it right now?" Rather than asking about why Han Li and the others had escaped from the ghostly mist, she instead inquired about that golden ape. "I'm not sure. Brother Jin and I were forcibly separated by the ghostly beings in the mist," Han Li replied truthfully. "Is that so?" Mu Qing's brows furrowed upon hearing this. Han Li glanced at the puppets they were facing off against and asked, "Senior Mu, what are these beings? Were they the ones that set up this ghostly mist?" "Fellow Taoist Han and I have only just recently escaped from this mist as well. We were just about to unleash some techniques to break this restriction, only to be forced into this confrontation by those beings, and we haven't had a chance to ask them anything yet. However, I didn't see these things last time I was in here, so I think they're just like us in that they also came into the infernal river from the outside." Mu Qing was clearly also rather perplexed. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. "As you figured out already, we're facing an army of puppets, but there's certainly nothing to be scoffed at. Those three puppet generals are all extremely powerful, and even if fellow Taoist Lan and I were to attack in person, we're still confident in our ability to kill them," Mu Qing said in a grave voice. On the other side, the white-haired woman didn't ask Yuan Yao and Yan Li any questions. Instead, she looked on at the three puppet generals and asked in a cold voice, "I don't care what you are, but answer me this. Are you going to withdraw this restriction or not?" "Withdraw this restriction? What a joke. You outsiders have infiltrated the holy land of our mayfly race, and you're trying to get your hands on our holy artifact. You're the ones who attacked us last time as well, right? We let you get away on that occasion, but that won't happen again," the purple-armored general replied in a cold voice. "The mayfly race." The white-haired beauty's expression changed drastically, while Mu Qing's heart jolted upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Han Li's brows furrowed in befuddlement. He had no recollection of seeing any records about such a race. "You know of our race? Then that makes things easier. If you surrender and hand yourselves over without a fight, we could perhaps spare your lives. Otherwise, even if you manage to get away this time, our race will deploy troops to wipe you off the face of the spirit realm." The purple-armored general was initially slightly taken aback, but a menacing tone then crept into its voice. Yu Qing and the white-haired woman glanced at one another upon hearing this, and their expressions had turned quite grim in the face of the threats made by the purple-armored general. The two of them then began to transmit their voices to one another in a silent conversation. The purple-armored general merely chuckled coldly upon seeing this, but did nothing to stop them. As the voice transmission continued, an indecisive look appeared on the white-haired woman's face, and Mu Qing's brows were also tightly furrowed. It appeared that neither of them could arrive at a decision. "You proclaim this to be the holy land of the Mayfly race, and you'll to support these claims. Since when did the Mayfly race switch to cultivating in yin ghost powers?" the white-haired woman asked in a cold voice. "You don't need to be made aware of that. Do you really think that the infernal river surrounding this space appeared out of thin air?" the purple-armored general replied with a cold chuckle. Yu Qing and the white-haired woman's expressions changed slightly upon hearing this, and they seemed to be growing a little more convinced by the armored general's claims. After a brief silence, the white-haired beauty adopted a cold expression and said, "HMPH, who knows if you're truly from the Mayfly race or merely imposters? Even if you really are from the Mayfly race, I'd only be wary if a heavenly Mayfly tier being from your race were present. You think a few puppets like you can force us to surrender?" Yu Qing didn't say anything to stop her, and a layer of azure chi had appeared over her body. Red light flashed within the eyes of the purple-armored general upon hearing this, and it wasted no further time with words as it slammed a palm onto the back of its rhinoceros steed. The beast immediately reared its head before inhaling deeply. All of the surrounding air seemed to have been sucked away by the rhinoceros, following which it opened its mouth with a low roar. A ball of azure light then shot forth amid a piercing flash of light, heading straight for the two demon monarchs. A thunderous rumbling noise was erupting from the ball of azure light, and the white-haired woman's expression darkened as she made a hand seal. Gray light flashed behind her, and a massive ghostly projection with a head of disheveled hair appeared, then swelled drastically in size. It opened its massive mouth and blasted forth a ball of black light in retaliation. The two balls of light clashed amid an earth-shattering boom. Azure and black light intertwined, creating a massive mushroom cloud in the aftermath of the explosion. A vicious light appeared in the white-haired woman's eyes upon seeing this, and she let loose a long, shrill cry. The thousands of ghostly soldiers then transformed into gusts of pitch-black yin winds as they swept toward their opponents, led by the 8 ghost monarchs. The opposing purple-armored generally harumphed coldly before drawing the 2 golden war hammers from his back. "Even though this is only a puppet body, I should be able to unleash half of my full power," the purple-armored general murmured to himself in an unintelligible voice, then swung his golden war hammers through the air. The war hammers were then released from his grasp and flew into the air before radiating boundless golden light, manifesting over 100 golden war hammer projections that came crashing down soundlessly toward the gusts of yin winds. 8 long cries erupted from amid the yin winds at once, following which the 8 yin armor ghost monarchs appeared at low altitudes. They either hurled their weapons through the air as streaks of black light, or thrust their palms violently into the air a few times, or opened their mouths to expel bursts of black light. In any case, 8 bursts of black light hurtled forth, combining to form a black barrier of light. All of the golden war hammer projections that struck the barrier of light were completely trapped like fish in a net. "Nice party trick." The purple-armored general's expression darkened as he let loose a derisive harumph. All of the golden war hammer projections caught within the light barrier then exploded in unison, and the barrier was completely pulverized by the resulting blasts of violent golden light. The golden light then descended onward, trying to engulf all 8 of the ghost monarchs. However, right at this moment, Mu Qing sprang into action. She flipped a hand over before grabbing the air, and a rich, peculiar fragrance suddenly wafted through the air beneath the golden light. Rainbow spiritual light then flashed, following which countless giant flower projections appeared out of thin air. These projections kept the golden light at bay as they clashed amid a resounding boom, and the yin armor profound ghosts down below took advantage of this opportunity to charge toward their enemies. The purple-armored general merely waved a hand in response without saying anything, and a row of crossbow-wielding crimson-armored puppets immediately stepped forward at once. then let loose their arrows in unison. Countless crimson arrows descended into the yin winds like a torrential downpour. Balls of crimson light exploded within the yin winds, and a series of ghostly figures began to plummet from the sky. However, during this split second, the yin winds plunged headfirst into the army of crimson-armored puppets, led by the 8 ghost monarchs. An extremely fierce battle ensued. None of the ghost monarchs nor normal yin armor profound ghosts attacked the 3 puppet generals. Conversely, the 3 puppets paid no heed to the ghostly soldiers, either, as their attention was entirely focused on the 2 demon monarchs. As for Han, Yuan Yao, and Yan Li, they were naturally also disregarded. The 2 women were naturally looking back at the 3 puppets with rapt focus. Aside from the purple-armored puppet, the other 2 puppet generals both had rather strange appearances. One of them was around 400 feet tall with 3 eyes on its head and a massive axe in its hands. It wore a suit of azure armor that was riddled with sharp black spikes, and it was truly a harrowing sight to behold. Meanwhile, the other puppet general was only around 20 feet tall and clad in a suit of crimson armor. However, it had 2 heads and 4 arms, each of which was holding a different weapon in the forms of a saber, a sword, a spear, and a halberd. Both of their steeds consisted of the same type of crimson water buffalo-like beast, and neither of these puppets had uttered a single word up to this point, seemingly content to allow the purple-armored puppet to speak on their behalf. Letter 1D4F, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D658, letter 1D498, letter 1D4E, letter 1D4FF, letter 1D658, letter 1D4F8, letter 1D662. However, the 3 eyes puppet suddenly spoke for the first time. There's no need to meet their assault head-on. We just have to stall them for a while. I've already notified the others, and they'll assist those ghostly beings to kill the other intruders, then come and reinforce us. The purple-armored puppet and 2-headed puppet both nodded in agreement, making it seem as if the 3-headed puppet was the true leader of the trio. The 3-headed puppet made no effort to lower its voice, so not only did Mu Qing and the white-haired beauty hear it, it was clearly audible even Han Li, Yuan Yao, and Yan Li. Mu Qing adopted a peculiar expression, while a deriding sneer appeared on the white-haired beauty's face. He, Sister Mu, seeing as they want to wait for some reinforcements, why don't we wait with them? The white-haired woman chuckled as she turned to Mu Qing. My thoughts exactly. We'll do as you say, Sister Lan, Mu Qing agreed with a smile. The white-haired woman nodded before withdrawing her hands into her sleeves, and the massive ghostly projection behind her hovered motionlessly in midair. Mu Qing also crossed her arms and stood completely still atop her golden flower. The 2 of them really did seem to be planning to wait. Meanwhile, the high-grade demon beast as well as Han Li and the others naturally stood still on the spot, having received no orders to attack. Hints of curiosity flashed through the eyes of the 3 puppets upon seeing this, but what the 2 women were doing played right into their hands, so they also merely remained on the spot with cold expressions on their faces. Weapon projections, yin winds, and streaks of spiritual light intertwined relentlessly in the air amid relentless strings of explosions. Shattered puppets and ghostly soldiers plummeted from the sky from time to time, before disappearing into black mist amid a string of dull thumps. Meanwhile, the 5 body integration stage powerful beings continued to engage in a tense standoff. The crimson-armored puppets clearly had the advantage in numbers and were more proficient in teamwork. Meanwhile, the yin armor profound ghosts were more powerful individually, and with the 8 ghost monarchs among their ranks, they were forcing the crimson-armored puppets back into retreat, seemingly having completely gained the upper hand. Thankfully for the crimson-armored puppets, the armored warriors on the 100 or so war carriages on their side were fighting without any fear of death, and the carriages themselves along with the beasts they were drawn by all possessed powerful abilities. Thus, they were able to combine their powers to ward off most of the ghost monarchs. Otherwise, the situation would have most likely been even worse for them. Contemplative look flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. Normal crimson-armored puppets moved quite slowly and clearly had lackluster reaction speed. These were only ordinary puppets with no spiritual sense imbued within them. In contrast, the yin armor profound ghosts that had been trained by the white-haired beauty were displaying their immense powers, lashing out with yin winds and all types of weapons to vanquish their enemies, and the opposing puppets were often either frozen into black blocks of ice or sliced into countless pieces by the blades of wind. The 8 yin armor demon monarchs were even more dominant. All of them had transformed into massive black-armored ghosts that were over 100 feet tall with gigantic bull horns on their heads and sets of sinister, menacing facial features. The puppets fought with all their might, only to be easily torn into shreds by these ghost monarchs. However, the three puppet generals paid no heed to this, as if the subordinates that were being destroyed were completely inconsequential. Meanwhile, the white-haired beauty and Mu Qing were naturally happy to maintain this standoff, seeing as their ghostly soldiers were annihilating the opposition. After a while, most of the crimson-armored puppets had been destroyed, as had all of the war carriages on their side. Conversely, a small portion of the yin-armor profound ghosts had disappeared, and the 8 ghost monarchs were also all riddled with wounds. A cold light flashed through the white-haired woman's eyes, and she turned around to glance at the other high-grade demon beasts, seemingly about to issue some kind of instruction. However, right at this moment, a burst of silent fluctuations erupted from deep within the mist, and the air in the area near Han Li and the others began to tremor and quake. This strange occurrence naturally drew everyone's attention. However, they could only tell that the sea of mist in the distance was tumbling and swirling violently, but they were unable to see through the mist and ascertain what was going on in there. Just as Han Li had also narrowed his eyes in bewilderment, a low buzzing sound swept toward them from the extremely far distance. A speck of white light flashed from afar, following which another earth-shattering roar rang out, and a scintillating white sun appeared within the mist. The sun then expanded rapidly, illuminating almost the entire sea of mist with its incandescent light. The white light then receded, yet an unfathomable burst of spiritual pressure began to wreak havoc within the space with reckless abandon. Crab! Everyone had reflexively closed their eyes in the face of that brilliant sun, and as soon as they sensed that burst of fearsome spiritual pressure, all of them turned around and fled the scene without any hesitation, flying away from the mist. Han Li was also among the people fleeing the scene. He flapped his thunderstorm wings and disappeared on the spot as an arc of lightning. Meanwhile, Yuan Yao and Yan Li suddenly gathered together as gray mist surged around their bodies, and they flew away amid gusts of yin winds that they'd conjured up. As for the other high-grade demon beast, all of them were also scattering as quickly as they could. A rumbling thunderclap rang out from the distance, following which a white hurricane erupted into the air at the center of the sea of mist, as if it were a white true dragon rising into the skies. However, the pillar of wind then abruptly shattered in the face of that explosive thunderclap. Howling winds began to sweep forth in all directions, and the winds were so fearsome that they seemed to be threatening to tear this entire space open. Even though a restriction had been placed on this mist in advance, there was no way that it was able to withstand such fierce winds. As such, the sea of mist was completely swept away without being able to offer any resistance. When Han Li reappeared over 10,000 feet away and turned toward back to assess the situation, his heart abruptly jolted with shock. The dense sea of mist that had stretched for as far as the eyes could see now ceased to exist, and countless gusts of furious white winds had taken its place. The place that they'd been situated at before had been completely transformed into a world of howling winds, with countless wind blades that were invisible to the naked eye surging through the air. This windstorm was extremely fierce. The puppets and ghostly soldiers that weren't able to get away in time were all swept up into these ferocious winds, and they were struggling with all their might to remain intact. However, the winds were simply too powerful to contend with, and after a series of explosions and howls of anguish, almost all of the puppets and yin armor profound ghosts were instantly eradicated into nothingness. Only the 8 ghost monarchs still remained, resisting with all their might as black light flashed over their bodies, but their situation was also very dire. The white-haired beauty's expression darkened upon seeing this. All of a sudden, she let loose a sharp cry, and all 8 ghost monarchs immediately let loose shrill cries of their own to resonate with her. They then barely managed to transform into balls of black light before hurtling toward the same spot. Brilliant black light erupted, and the 8 balls of light combined into one. Ripples then ran along the surface of this ball of light, following which it transformed into a gargantuan ghost that was several hundred feet tall. As soon as this ghost took shape, it fled toward a certain direction, escaping the area encompassed by the vicious winds in just a few flashes, before rushing directly toward the white-haired beauty as quickly as they could. At this moment, the 3 puppet generals were appraising the windstorm with contemplative looks in their eyes, seemingly in deep thought about something. All of a sudden, heavy footsteps sounded from deep within the gusts of wind. The ground tremored slightly with each and every step, and each successive step seemed to be heavier and closer than the last one. It was as if a colossal creature was making its way toward everyone, and it was doing so at an alarming speed. Everyone looked on at the windstorm, with grave expressions on their faces. Moments later, a mountainous black shadow began to appear from within the gust of wind, and it only seemed to be expanding further as it progressed onward. The ferocious winds didn't have any effect on the black shadow at all, and after a hint of blue light flashed through Han Li's eyes, an expression of enlightenment appeared on his face. A thunderous roar suddenly erupted from within the howling winds, following which the black shadow leaped out of the windstorm, revealing itself to be a purple giant. It was none other than Dai Zu's purple-blood puppet. At this moment, the two crimson-robed figures were standing on its shoulders, while a black-robed man stood atop its head. The black-robed man was none other than the most mysterious being among the four demon monarchs, Liu Zhu. The white-haired beauty was elated to see this, yet before she had a chance to say anything, green light suddenly flashed through the eyes of the three puppets in the distance, and the three-eyes puppet exclaimed, "How did you two come out alive? Where's everyone else?" "Everyone else? You mean these things?" Liu Zhu said in an indifferent voice before sweeping a sleeve through the air, and four round objects suddenly tumbled down from above the purple-blood puppet's head. And Li focused his gaze on those objects to find that they were all crimson heads that were wearing strange helmets. "You killed all of them. That's impossible. The four of them are even more powerful than us three, and they had so many ghostly beings to assist them." The purple-armored puppet was completely incredulous as he looked at the heads on the ground. If your true bodies were here, 7 golden mayfly tier beings really would pose a stern challenge even for me. However, you're all merely puppets, and you'd be lucky to be able to unleash even half of your power in your current state, so of course you're no match for me. Fellow Taoist Mu, fellow Taoist Lan, kill them all. Liu Zhu instructed with a sinister chuckle, and astonishing killing intent erupted from his body. The three puppets were all horrified to hear this, and one of them yelled, "Split up and run." The three puppets then urged their steeds into action in unison, instantly transforming into 3 streaks of light of different colors that fled toward different directions. Following just a few flashes, they were already several thousand feet away. All of their steeds possessed strange movement techniques that were extremely fast. However, Liu Zhu and the others seemed to have a tacit understanding between them. The white-haired beauty let loose an unsettling chuckle before hurtling toward the purple-armored puppet as a plume of azure smoke, followed closely by the body integration stage gargantuan ghost, which flew through the air as a ball of black light. Mu Qing stomped a foot onto her golden flower, and a black formation of light appeared out of thin air, following which both she and her flower disappeared. In the next instant, she reappeared far closer to the twin-headed puppet than she was a moment ago. One of the crimson-robed figures let loose a long roar, and the purple-blood puppet strode forward as purple and red flames erupted all over its body, covering a distance of over 1,000 feet with just a single stride, pursuing the three-eyes puppet. Thus, all of the body integration stage beings disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only Han Li, Yuan Yao, Yan Li, and a dozen or so high-grade demon beasts. Right at this moment, Yan Li transmitted her voice to him. "Take this opportunity to get away, fellow Taoist Han. These demon beasts won't be able to stop you." Han Li remained completely expressionless upon hearing this, but he really was tempted to make a move. However, he then cast his gaze toward a certain direction, and what he saw there immediately made his heart sink. "Haha, you really are an extraordinary man, fellow Taoist Han. As expected, my concealment abilities weren't enough to fool you." A burst of hearty laughter suddenly erupted from empty space, following which golden light flashed and a golden figure appeared. It was none other than the golden ape, Jin Ling. Even though the ape was chortling in a raucous manner, it wore an extremely cold expression as it looked at Han Li. Yuan Yao and Yan Li's expressions changed in unison upon seeing this. They had spent many years in the Earth Abyss, so they were naturally well aware of just how powerful this golden ape was. The two of them were extremely confident in Han Li's abilities, but they knew that there was no way he'd be able to directly oppose a being at the pinnacle of the spatial tempering stage. With this ape present along with all of the other high-grade demon beasts, it would be impossible for him to get away. "I'm glad you're safe, Brother Jin. After we were separated in that ghostly mist, I was worried about you for a long while, but it appears my concerns were unnecessary. With your immense cultivation base, those ghostly beings never stood a chance," Han Li said in a calm voice. I do have some self-preservation skills, but I can't compare with you, fellow Taoist Han. You were able to emerge from the mist as a spirit general. That's very much worthy of my admiration, Jin Ling praised with a smile on its face. I don't have such abilities. It was all thanks to fellow Taoist Yuan and fellow Taoist Yan that I was able to escape from this mist, Han Li replied with a shake of his head. Those two may have certain methods to find their way out of this mist, but without Brother Han's assistance, they wouldn't have been able to deal with the powerful ghostly beings along the way, Jin Ling continued. Han Li merely smiled in response and didn't say anything further. However, his mind was quickly scrambling. He was confident that his powers were not inferior to Jin Ling's, and even weighing those high-grade demon beasts into the equation, he was still confident that he had a 70% to 80% chance of getting away. However, that was only if he were to escape on his own. If he were to take Yuan Yao and Yan Li with him, then that probability fell to less than 50%. This was not a worthwhile risk for him to take. In any case, this infernal river was in extremely perilous and unpredictable places, so it was best to find another opportunity in the future. Thus, Han Li made his decision and began a chat with Jin Ling. Seeing as Han Li seemed to have no intention of getting away, the golden ape also relaxed a little, and the two of them engaged in a pleasant conversation as if they'd been good friends for many years. Just as they were conversing with one another, a ball of green light suddenly sped back toward them from afar. Mu Qing was standing atop her golden flower as she flew soundlessly through the air, and Han Li faltered initially upon seeing this, a little surprised that she was back so soon, but he then recalled back to the teleportation-like movement techniques that she'd unleashed in the past, and he was quickly enlightened. Following a few flashes, the ball of green light appeared overhead before fading to reveal Mu Qing's slender figure. I pay my respects to my mistress. The golden ape immediately extended a respectful bow. I'm glad you're safe, Jin Ling. An elated look appeared on Mu Qing's face at the sight of the golden ape. It was all thanks to the protective treasures you bestowed upon me, mistress. Otherwise, there was no way that I could have managed to remain unscathed in the face of so many ghostly beings. In the end, I was only able to escape with assistance from Master Liu Zhu and Master Dai Zhu, the golden ape replied. That windstorm in the end was clearly fellow Taoist Liu Zhu's handiwork. This is the first time I've seen him unleash a wind attribute ability, Mu Qing said in a slow voice, and there was a hint of unidentifiable emotion in her tone. Master Liu Zhu's powers are indeed quite unfathomable, but it was exactly because of this that those puppets and ghostly beings were vanquished so easily, Jin Ling said in a slightly grim voice. You're right. In a perilous place like this, the more powerful fellow Taoist Liu Zhu is, the better. Seeing as I've already taken care of my opponent, the others most likely won't take too much longer either. Mu Qing nodded after a brief silence before casting her gaze into the distance. Coincidentally, in the instant that she raised her head, a speck of spiritual light flashed in the extremely far distance in the direction that she'd cast her gaze toward, following which a ball of black chi appeared and hurtled toward them. Moments later, the ball of black chi appeared before everyone like a shooting star, before receding to reveal the white-haired beauty. The woman appeared to be completely unscathed, but her aura was slightly more feeble than when she'd set off, indicating that she'd expended quite a bit of magic power. She looked around before her brows furrowed as she asked, "Why aren't Liu Zhu and Dai Zhu back yet? With their abilities, I would have thought that they'd be the first ones to take care of their opponent." I'm not sure of that myself. Perhaps they encountered some mishaps along the way. Where are your 8 ghost monarchs, Sister Lan? Didn't they go with you to hunt down that puppet? Mu Qing asked with a curious expression. The puppet self-detonated on the brink of death, and the 8 ghost monarchs were all severely damaged as a result, so I've stored them away into my Yingcloud pouch for recovery. I really am getting rather worried about Liu Zhu and Dai Zhu, though. If you and I are the only ones remaining, there'd be no chance for us to secure the divine infernal river elixir. A concerned look appeared on the white-haired beauty's face. Mu Qing was just about to say something in response when a resounding boom suddenly erupted from a certain direction. That direction was none other than the one that Liu Zhu and Dai Zhu had departed toward earlier. Mu Qing and the white-haired beauty exchanged a glance upon hearing this earth-shattering commotion, and both of them could see their own surprise mirrored on one another's faces. Could it be? The white-haired beauty's brows furrowed with concern. However, before she had a chance to finish her sentence, a sharp screech suddenly rang out from the direction where the explosion had just taken place. As soon as Han Li heard this unbearable sound, his vision blacked out and the plummeted from the sky. Crap! Han Li almost immediately reacted by sealing off his sense of hearing, then activating his great development technique. However, what was quite astonishing to him was that this sharp screech completely disregarded his attempt to seal off his hearing, piercing directly into his spiritual sense anyway. The great development technique was indeed quite useful in such situations, but its activation had been cut off halfway by that sharp screech, so its effects were naturally severely hampered. Han Li's heart jolted with shock as he let loose a loud roar, unleashing the spirit-stun thorn on himself to send a burst of searing pain piercing into his spiritual sense. As such, he was temporarily able to recover his clarity of mind and regain control over his own body. He then unleashed a layer of golden lightning around his body amid a loud thunderclap, then abruptly slammed his black and white palms together in front of his chest. 5 colored flames and gray light immediately erupted from his hands in unison, then intertwined with one another to form a dual-layered barrier of light that encapsulated his body. With these defensive measures in place, the effect that the sharp screech had on his spiritual sense was severely dampened, and he managed to right himself in midair again. However, he then caught sight of Yuan Yao and Yan Li, both of whom were still rapidly plummeting out of the sky, and they were going to crash heavily onto the jagged rocks down below very soon. Thus, he immediately made a grabbing motion toward them, upon which countless gray threads shot forth from within the gray light, instantly latching onto the 2 women before drawing them toward him. Han Li then expanded the flames and gray light emanating from his body to encompass the 2 of them as well, and a hint of color returned to their cheeks as they regained the ability to hover in midair again. At this moment, a string of dull thumps rang out from down below as the dozen or so high-grade demon beasts fell heavily to the ground, having been unable to withstand the effects of the sharp screech. All of the demon beasts possessed robust bodies, so falling from this height wasn't an issue at all for them. However, all of them had their hands pressed over their ears with all their might while they thrashed and rolled around in agony. All types of protective spiritual lights flashed erratically around bodies, but they seemed to be completely ineffective. Han Li drew a sharp breath upon seeing this before casting his gaze toward the others. Jin Ling was situated beside Mu Qing, and the golden flower down below had conjured up a series of flower projection to shield them from the effects of the sharp screech. As for the white-haired beauty, she was enshrouded in a ball of yin winds and stood in a completely motionless manner, clearly also unaffected by the sharp screech. However, all 3 of them were looking on into the distance with intense, unblinking eyes as the screech was only growing louder, and an incredible phenomenon had appeared up ahead. A massive crimson insect projection had emerged up ahead, and it was so massive that it took up virtually the entire sky. It had a pair of inky black compound eyes that shimmered with a cold light, while a pair of semi-transparent wings flapped on either side of its body like a pair of light barriers. Letter 1D65B, letter 1D4FB, letter 1D486, letter 1D4E, letter 1D498, letter 1D65A, letter 1D4EC, letter 1D490, letter 1D662. It appeared to be a fly that had been enlarged countless times. The debilitating screeching sound that had almost felled Han Li was coming from none other than the wings of that insect projection. As the projection rapidly flapped its wings, fluctuations that were visible to the naked eye were proliferating from them. They then seemed to have disappeared as they surged further through the air, but in reality, they had turned into that sharp screeching sound that was clearly audible even from Han Li's location. Even from so far away, the sharp screech possessed such fearsome might. If they were situated right before the insect projection, there'd be no need for it to do anything other than flapping its wings to kill its enemies. However, this fly-like projection wasn't only flapping its wings. It was also blasting countless thick pillars of crimson light out of its compound eyes. These pillars of light rained down from above, virtually encompassing the entire space down below. Even though Han Li couldn't truly experience the might of these pillars of light for himself, they were still a formidable sight to behold, even from afar. Beneath the massive net constructed from these intertwining pillars of light, there were 2 beings evading these pillars of light with all their might. These 2 beings were each around 100 feet in size, but they were so tiny and insignificant compared to the gargantuan insect projection that they weren't immediately noticed. Blue light flashed within Han Li's eyes, and he immediately identified these 2 beings. One of them was the purple-blood puppet, which had shrunk down drastically, while the other being came as a massive shock to Han Li. This was an inky black monster with 6 feelers extending from its head and 6 blade-like limbs. This being wasn't much smaller than the purple-blood puppet, and its entire body was covered in steel-like strands of hard fur. Its 2 eyes were long and thin and shimmering with an eerie red light, while the 2 pairs of bird wings on its back were flapping rapidly. It was also a massive strange insect. The insect and the purple-blood puppet remained unaffected by the sharp screech even though they were so close to the insect projection, and they were flashing through the air like wraith-like apparitions. On many occasions, the pillars of red light seemed to have punctured their bodies, only for those to be revealed as mere afterimages. As the purple-blood puppet was taking evasive measures, it produced a massive axe and unleashed a relentless barrage of crescent axe projections. In contrast, the giant black insect was attacking with its 6 limbs, which were flashing through the air to unleash streaks of black light that resembled sharp spikes. Most of their attacks were vanquished by the red pillars of light, and even the ones that snuck through were kept at bay by a layer of invisible power. "What is that? Could it be that it's a heavenly mayfly tier being?" the white-haired beauty exclaimed as she stared at the insect projection. "I'm actually more intrigued by fellow Taoist Liu Zu's true form," Mu Qing murmured as her pupils contracted. The white-haired beauty repressed her shock as a dark expression appeared on her face, and she said, "Now's not the time to be arguing about such trivial matters, fellow Taoist Mu. Heavenly mayfly tier beings are only second to true spirits within the mayfly race. If that thing is truly such a being, then none of us would be able to escape. Sister Lan, have you still not figured it out yet? That thing is just the projection of a heavenly mayfly tier being, and it must have been forcibly summoned here through the use of a secret technique by the puppet that Liu Zu and Dai Zu were pursuing. As soon as this projection exhausts all of its power, it'll disappear. Liu Zu and Dai Zu are clearly well aware of this, which is why they're merely doing all they can to stall for time," Mu Qing said in a calm voice. "A projection?" White-haired beauty faltered upon hearing this before carefully appraising the gargantuan fly up ahead. Only after a long while did she heave a sigh of relief as she said, "That is indeed just a projection. It possesses only around 1/5 of the power of a true heavenly mayfly. Furthermore, none of the actual being's spiritual sense had been imbued within this projection. Otherwise, the 2 of them wouldn't have been able to last so long. Even so, this thing's attacks are extremely powerful. If the puppet or Liu Zu were to get hit by any one of those attacks, they'd be in real trouble. Of course, even though it's only a projection, heavenly mayfly tier beings are only second to true spirit beings, after all, so this is certainly not something we can contend with," Mu Qing sighed in a resigned manner. After ascertaining the nature of this projection, the 2 women naturally weren't going to charge in battle against it. They merely looked on from afar, patiently awaiting the moment that the power of the insect projection would run out. Meanwhile, Han Li listened to their conversation off to the side, with a peculiar look in his eyes. The situation unfolding before their eyes naturally wasn't something that he could meddle in. At this moment, the white-haired beauty looked down at the high-grade demon beasts, which were still rolling around on the ground below, and her brows furrowed as she swept a sleeve downward. A swath of black light swept forth, instantly enshrouding all of those demon beasts within. The demon beasts immediately returned to their senses and finally stopped thrashing and writhing, but all of them were still completely feeble and unable to rise to their feet. However, the white-haired beauty showed no intention of doing anything else to help them as she turned toward the colossal insect projection again. It was just as Mu Qing had said. The devastatingly powerful insect projection suddenly began to radiate piercing red light a while later, then exploded into countless pieces amid a rumbling boom before finally disappearing without a trace. The pillars of crimson light raining down from above also instantly vanished. The strange black insect and purple-blood puppet both heaved a massive collective sigh of relief before standing still on the spot to recover both their composure and energy. After a brief period of recuperation, both of them flew toward Mu Qing and the others. Moments later, the purple-blood puppet and the black insect appeared in the air overhead. Even though they had determined well in advance that this insect was none other than Liu Zu, both Mu Qing and the white-haired beauty were still staring at it with grave expressions. Crimson light flashed from the shoulders of the purple-blood puppets, following which the 2 crimson-robed figures appeared. They'd been hiding within the puppet's body this entire time. Meanwhile, black light swirled around the black insect's body, and it quickly shrank before adopting a human form. It was none other than Liu Zu, except his black cloak had disappeared, thereby revealing his true appearance. Han Li's heart jolted with shock as he cast his gaze toward the man. Liu Zu's facial features were mostly identical to that of a normal man, and he possessed quite a youthful face. However, he had a pair of green compound eyes that shimmered with a cold light, creating a very unsettling sight to behold. It really is fellow Taoist Liu Zu. The white-haired beauty heaved a long sigh of relief. Was that ever in doubt? Liu Zu asked in a nonchalant manner as he hovered in midair with his hands clasped behind his back. Brother Liu Zu, seeing as you possess the body of a spirit insect, are you related in some way to the mayfly race? Mu Qing asked. The mayfly race? I originally hailed from that race. Are you satisfied with that response? Liu Zu replied with a faint smile. Both Mu Qing and the white-haired beauty's expressions both changed drastically upon hearing this. So you knew of this place in advance, yet still intentionally led us to this place. The white-haired beauty's voice immediately cooled significantly. I'm afraid that you've wrongly accused me here, fellow Taoists. I was aware that the mayfly race had a holy land, but at the time, my cultivation base was far too pitiful to be informed of its specific location. After that, I stayed in the earth abyss for countless years, and I've been stuck at my current cultivation base for almost longer than I can remember. If I'd known that there was an entrance leading to this place from the earth abyss and wanted to plot against you from the beginning, why would I have delayed so long before leading all of you here? I really did unintentionally discover that this place could be accessed from the earth abyss through the infernal river, but I truly had no idea that the mayfly race would send puppets to this place. According to my knowledge, the holy land of the mayfly race usually only opens up once every few thousand years, and it's only been several centuries since we were last here. I can only say that we were extremely unfortunate to have encountered these puppets under such circumstances. On top of that, if I were working with the mayfly race, why would I have only asked for puppets to be deployed to this place? I'm well aware of your abilities, and I'm certainly aware of the fact that those puppets would have been no match for you, Liu Zu replied in a calm manner. Mu Qing and the white-haired beauty exchanged a glance upon hearing Liu Zu's words. The two of them couldn't identify any holes in his logic, but both of them knew that he wasn't telling the truth somehow. It was just that they couldn't identify what exactly he had lied about. What do you think, fellow Taoist Daizu? Mu Qing suddenly turned to the two crimson-robed figures. The two of them had remained completely silent from the moment they'd reappeared on the shoulders of the purple-blood puppet. The two crimson-robed figures exchanged a glance upon hearing this before one of them replied, I think Brother Liu Zu is telling the truth. Even though Brother Liu Zu isn't the one who spent the longest time among us in the Earth Abyss, he's definitely not the only who's been in the Earth Abyss for the shortest period of time, either. So if he wanted to plot against us, there really is no need for him to resort to these tactics. Could it be that two of you want to turn back now? We've already made the mayfly race our enemy. Would you two be willing to give up on the divine infernal river elixir after all that? The crimson-robed figure had completely sided with Liu Zu. Mu Qing and the white-haired beauty couldn't help but exchange another glance upon seeing the crimson-robed figure's stance on the matter. A short while later, the white-haired beauty's expression eased, and she smiled as she said, seeing as fellow Taoist Daizu believes in Brother Liu Zu, we're also willing to do the same. However, if the mayfly race has already become aware of intruders in their holy land from our last visit here, why didn't they deploy more troops or send more actual golden mayfly tier beings to this place rather than station all these puppets here? In that case, it would have been very difficult for us to get away. That's quite simple. The mayfly race discovered our intrusion from last time, but they don't know when we were going to come back again, so they could only station beings here that could permanently remain in this place. Even though this is the holy land of the mayfly race, normal beings of the race wouldn't be able to stay here for long. Otherwise, their cultivation bases would be severely damaged at best, and in worst-case scenarios, they could even die here. If we'd encountered a true insect sea army, we'd be devoured until not a single shred of our bodies remained, Liu Zu replied. White-haired beauty shuddered upon hearing the words insect sea, and she forced a smile onto her face as she replied, There's no need to make such jokes, Brother Liu Zu. The mayfly race may not be particularly renowned elsewhere in the spirit realm, but their influence in this area is not inferior to that of the major races of the spirit realm. They wouldn't deploy an insect sea army just to take care of a few body integration stage beings like us. A hint of fear also flashed through Mu Qing's eyes before she gave a calm analysis. Indeed, from what I've heard, even true spirits are fearful toward the insect seas deployed by the mayfly army. Conversely, unleashing insect seas is extremely taxing to the entire race, so they wouldn't do so unless the circumstances were extremely dire. I didn't think that the two of you would know so much about our mayfly race. Indeed, it would only take a single heavenly mayfly tier being to destroy all of us, so there's certainly no need to deploy an insect sea. That's enough on this matter for now. Let's get away from this place. It won't be a simple task for the mayfly race to deploy more beings to this place, and that process would take them at least several months. That's enough time for us to find the divine elixir, then return the way we'd come. We did suffer some severe casualties at the hands of those ghostly beings, but we've also slain many of the high-grade ghostly beings in the infernal river, so the rest of our journey should be a lot smoother. By the way, how many more ghostly soldiers and puppets do we have at our disposal? Liu Zhu asked. I stored away as many puppets as I could when those ghostly beings attacked, but there are only just over 1,000 of them left, one of the crimson-robed figures replied. My situation is even worse. Not only were the ghost monarchs severely wounded by the puppet's self-detonation, all of them remaining profound ghosts were also destroyed by the wind attribute ability you unleashed, the white-haired beauty sighed. What are you saying, fellow Taoist Lan? Even though we agreed that you had to refine 8,000 profound ghosts, the pure yin qi I supplied to you was far more than enough to refine that number of ghostly soldiers, so you must have refined more than the 8,000 that were revealed, right? Now's not the time to be hiding such resources, Liu Zhu said as his expression darkened. The white-haired beauty faltered upon hearing this, and a slightly awkward look appeared on her face. I didn't think that you were aware of this, brother Liu Zhu. Indeed, in order to prepare for unforeseen circumstances, I refined 500 extra profound ghosts. Even though that's not a lot, their individual prowess is far superior to that of normal yin armor profound ghosts. All right, even though there are still several more perilous places we must pass through during the remainder of our journey, those profound ghosts on top of what's left of the puppets should be enough to get us through to the finish line. I know that you may not fully trust me, but once we secure the divine infernal river elixir, we'll be able to split up and you can go wherever you please. However, I advise you not to try any little tricks before that. Otherwise, don't blame me for turning on you. A threatening tone crept into Liu Zhu's voice as he spoke. The other demon monarchs' expressions changed slightly, but none of them responded to his words, as if they hadn't heard him in the first place. Liu Zhu didn't find their reaction to be strange in the slightest. He merely waved a hand through the air and said, "Let's go." He then transformed into a ball of black light that flew on ahead. The dozen or so high-grade demon beasts down below immediately followed suit. The two crimson-robed figures glanced at one another before sweeping their sleeves through the air in unison, summoning specks of black light from within. Those specks of black light then began to glow with spiritual lights of different colors before transforming into puppets of different shapes and forms. These puppets had clearly been carefully preserved by the two crimson-robed figures. Not only were they all in brand new condition, most of them were extremely intricately crafted. At this moment, the white-haired beauty also raised a hand to hurl forth a palm-sized black leather pouch, and the pouch rotated in midair before tipping itself over to expel a burst black yin winds. A group of black-armored ghostly soldiers then emerged from within those yin winds. These ghostly soldiers appeared to be quite similar in appearance to the yin armor profound ghosts from before, but they appeared to be more sturdy and also larger in stature. From a distance, they presented quite a formidable sight to behold. Go! The ghostly soldiers swept toward Liu Zhu as a swath of black mist under the white-haired beauty's command. Yuan Yao and Yan Li could only part with Han Li to follow the white-haired woman. At this moment, the puppet army also rose into the air and flew along at low altitudes with spiritual light of different colors enshrouding their bodies. The purple-blood puppet led the way from the two crimson-robed figures still situated on its shoulders. Letter 1D6A letter 1D4 2B letter 1D6AT letter 1D5F2 letter 1D568 letter 1D41E letter 1D554 letter 1D428 letter 1D5FA. Yu Qing glanced at Han Li with an indifferent expression before also flying away with her golden flower beneath her feet. Let's sit off as well, fellow Taoist Han. Han Li turned to discover Jin Ling appraising him with a hint of a smile on its face, seemingly intent on staying with Han Li to monitor his actions. Thus, Han Li nodded expressionlessly before rising up into the air as a streak of azure light. The golden ape chuckled before following closely behind him as a streak of golden light. A few days later, in front of a cave in a set of grayish-white mountain ranges situated deep within the infernal river, There were several ghostly beings of different forms standing motionlessly on the spot. These ghostly beings were enshrouded under a layer of azure smoke, and among them were faint white shadows, as well as massive skeletons that were several tens of feet tall. The white-robed ghostly woman who'd faced Han Li in battle once before abruptly departing was one of those ghostly beings. However, all of them were severely wounded, and their auras were extremely feeble. Even the ghostly woman that had proven to be a very troublesome opponent to Han Li was missing an arm, leaving her as an amputee. Standing at the very center of these ghostly beings was a puppet clad in a suit of crimson armor. This was one of the crimson-armored puppets deployed by the Mayfly race. From its outward appearance, this puppet was no different from the other normal crimson-armored puppets. However, the ghostly beings around it clearly all wore expressions of awe and veneration, seemingly rather fearful of it. The puppet stood in a stationary manner among the high-grade ghostly beings, appraising the dark cave before it with faint green light shimmering in its eyes. After a while, a long sigh sounded from deep within the cave, following which an elderly voice rang out. "Don't you think it's inappropriate for the Mayfly race to be requesting for my help?" The ghostly beings all adopted serious expressions upon hearing this. The crimson-armored puppet replied, "I'm only doing this because I have no choice, Senior. The ones who have encroached upon our holy land are far more powerful than we'd imagined, and there are 4 of 5 of them that are even more powerful than our golden Mayfly tier beings. Aside from myself, all of the puppets have been destroyed. I've already sent out a signal requesting for assistance, but it'll take at least half a year before reinforcements will arrive. By that time, those people would have most likely fled the scene well in advance. Seeing as you have some ties with our Mayfly race, I can only request for your assistance, Senior." The crimson-armored puppet extended a respectful bow toward the opening of the cave. "HMPH, the agreement I made with your Mayfly race was that I would only stay in your holy land for a while in order to rest and recuperate. I'm not pledging my allegiance to the Mayfly race. I've already repaid any debts I owe you, and I even went out of my way to gather all of these high-grade ghostly beings to assist you on this occasion. Yet now, you're asking me to fight for you in person. Don't you think that's gone too far?" The owner of the elderly voice harumphed coldly, and the entire cave tremored with his discontent. "Senior Jiang, I'm not familiar with the details of your agreement with our Mayfly race, but with your unfathomable powers, taking care of those beings would be an extremely simple task for you. If you're really reluctant to eradicate them in person, then please allow me to borrow your 5-dragon chopper. That will suffice as well," the puppet replied. "The 5-dragon chopper is one of my most prized treasures. Why should I lend it to you? I paid a sufficiently heavy price to the elders of your Mayfly race in order to enter the infernal river." The elderly man seemed to have recalled something an unsavory memory, and his voice cooled even further. The crimson-armored puppet didn't dare to push the elderly man any further. Instead, it suddenly produced an extremely intricate thumb-sized black vial before proposing, "Prior to my departure, the elders of our race bestowed upon me a small vial of yin water essence. I'm willing to offer this in exchange for your assistance, Senior." Yin water essence. The owner of the elderly voice seemed to be quite stunned by this offer. The puppet was filled with renewed hope upon hearing the shift in the elderly man's tone, and it continued, "It takes over 100,000 years just for a tiny drop of this yin water essence to be formed, and not much of it can be found even in the entire spirit realm, making it an extremely rare treasure." A burst of black light swept forth from within the cave, wrenching the small vial from the puppet's grasp before drawing it into the cave, but the puppet made no effort to stop this. "This is indeed yin water essence. Looks like those old monsters in your Mayfly race have got me wrapped around their fingers," the elderly man sighed in a resigned manner. "Then you've agreed to help me, Senior." The crimson-armored puppet was ecstatic. "I have, but I've already made an agreement with the elders of your race to repress the yin-chi backlash of this space for your Mayfly race. During recent times, the source the yin-chin in this place has been rather unstable, so I won't be able to leave this place. As such, I can only lend you my 5-dragon chopper," the elderly man replied after a brief hesitation. "Thank you, Senior. With the 5-dragon chopper, I'll be able to slay those intruders with ease," the crimson-armored puppet said in an elated voice. "All right, here's the treasure." The elderly man wasted no further time as a streak of silver light shot forth from within the cave, reaching the crimson-armored puppet in a flash. The puppet focused its gaze to find a mundane-looking silver chopper hovering before it. Aside from the fact that the surface of its blade was as smooth and bright as a mirror, There was nothing else out of the ordinary about it. Senior, is this really the 5-dragon chopper? The crimson-armored puppet picked up the chopper and carefully examined it with a hint of bewilderment in its eyes. Hee, are you worried that I'm swindling you? The elderly man chuckled coldly. The crimson-armored puppet hurriedly shook its head and tried to explain. I wouldn't dare to think that. It's just that this chopper. However, right at this moment, the chopper tremored and flew out of its grasp, then hovered in midair before radiating brilliant silver light. Immediately thereafter, several clear dragon roars erupted from the chopper, following which 5 massive worm projections slowly emerged along its blade, presenting an intimidating yet spectacular sight to behold. I refined this 5-dragon chopper many years ago from the souls and remains of 5 immensely powerful worms I'd slain while traveling on other continents. Back when it was first forged, it was immediately instated on the chaotic myriad spirit roll, and even now, it's still among the top few handful treasures on that spirit roll, the elderly man declared in a proud voice. Apologies for my foolishness, Senior. I'll immediately return this treasure after I take care of those intruders. The crimson-armored puppet was ecstatic upon seeing the worm projections manifested by the chopper, and it immediately made a hand seal, following which the chopper disappeared up its sleeve as a streak of silver light. I've already cultivated this treasure to be one with my soul, so even if you take it away from here, I can recover it at a whim. On top of that, you won't be able to make use of the treasure's full power, especially not in that puppet body of yours. I'll impart upon you a mantra for you to activate the power of your spiritual sense to control the 5-dragon chopper. Even though you won't be able to wield this treasure for long, it should be more than enough to take care of those intruders. However, if you choose to do this, the spiritual sense that you've infused into this puppet will be severely damaged. Are you sure you want to take this course of action? The elderly man asked. Green eyes flashed in the puppet's eyes upon hearing this, and it quickly replied, if we don't stop these outsiders, I'll be punished by the elders of our race even if I were to make a safe return. I'd rather take the risk and sacrifice this portion of my spiritual sense if required. Good, seeing as that's the case, I'll teach you the mantra right away. The elderly man chuckled before his voice trailed off. However, the crimson-armored puppet's eyes were flashing incessantly with rapt focus, as if it were listening intently to something. After a while, the puppet exhaled before extending a final respectful bow toward the cave. Thank you for your kindness, Senior. I must make haste, so I'll be taking my leave now. Not so fast. Here's a vial of pills. Feed them to the other ghostly beings. As long as these ghostly beings can recover their powers, they'll be of assistance to you. The yin water essence you gave me is quite precious, so I'll throw in the pills to make it a fair trade. A gust of wind swept forth out of the cave, sending a white jade vial flying toward the puppet. The crimson-armored puppet was naturally ecstatic to see this, and it immediately stowed the jade vial away before bidding farewell to the elderly man in the cave again. The ghostly beings also departed in silence behind the puppet. Meanwhile, Liu Zhu and the others were flying through the air above a forest filled with dead trees, when a large horde of flying skeletons suddenly flew toward them from the forest down below. These skeletons appeared to be remains of some kind of insect beast. All of them had extremely large front limbs that were like pairs of massive bone blades, and their bodies were enshrouded in balls of yellow qi as they charged toward the army of puppets and ghostly soldiers. In order to conserve their magic power, Liu Zhu and the others refrained from engaging these insect skeletons in battle. Instead, the puppets and ghostly soldiers were deployed to face the oncoming enemies. Swaths of saber projections and sword qi hurtled through the air amid gusts of yin winds, quickly slicing these skeletons into countless pieces. However, a peculiar scene then ensued. Regardless of how severely damaged the skeletons were, or how many pieces they'd been pulverized into, as soon as they fell into the dead forest, they'd be completely regenerated before flying up to join the fray again. It was as if they possessed immortal bodies. Han Li had also refrained from engaging in this battle, but his expression changed slightly upon seeing this. Thankfully, they still had many puppets and ghostly soldiers left. Otherwise, these skeletons would have been quite a nuisance to deal with. It was no wonder that Liu Zhu and the others had insisted on preparing so many puppets and profound ghosts before embarking on this journey. Thus, everyone flew onward while the puppets and ghostly soldiers kept these insect skeletons at bay, and it took them the better part of a day to finally fly out of this dead forest. After emerging from the forest, the insect skeletons were unable to continue regenerating, and they disintegrated into clouds of gray mist after their remains plummeted to the ground. The skeletons seemed to possess a certain level of intelligence as they immediately returned to the forest after witnessing the fate that befell that less fortunate companion. And that was Han Li quite amazed by this sequence of events. It appeared that this dead forest had to have some unique properties. If it weren't for the fact that Liu Zhu and the others were intent on forging ahead as quickly as possible, he would have been quite tempted to investigate the area. After flying onward for a while longer, a large black lake suddenly appeared up ahead. The surface of the lake was inky black and enshrouded under a layer of faint green mist. It was quite obvious that this was not the place for a picnic. However, Liu Zhu paid no heed to this as he flew on ahead, leading everyone directly into the mist without any hesitation. Not long after that, sounds of battle erupted within the mist once again. A month later, all of the puppets and ghostly soldiers had been completely eradicated, and everyone was greeted by the sight of a set of gray mountain ranges in the distance. That was their final destination, the Yinbon mountain ranges where divine infernal river elixir could be found. At this point, there were barely even any high-grade demon beasts left aside from the demon monarchs. With Han Li and Jin Ling's powers, they were naturally still alive and well. Yuan Yao and Yan Li encountered perilous situations on several occasions during the journey, but Han Li had made an effort to look after them, so they managed to survive those ordeals with only minor injuries. At this moment, the group stopped around 50 kilometers away from the mountain ranges. The demon monarchs had gathered together to discuss something with grave expressions on their faces. Han Li was looking on at the mountain ranges up ahead with a heavy heart. The second half of the journey had not gone as he'd expected. He thought that with how perilous the infernal river was, there would always be chances for him to get away from the demon monarchs. However, to his surprise, they did encounter some perilous situations along this stretch of the journey, but none that were able to draw the demon monarch away. Furthermore, Jin Ling seemed to have received some kind of instruction from Mu Qing, as the golden ape refused to leave Han Li's side. What was even more depressing to Han Li was that this golden ape was also proficient in some kind of spirit eye ability, so even if he were to unleash some kind of concealment technique, it'd be very difficult for him to escape its surveillance. Of course, if he wanted to escape on his own, he could still escape using his high zenith invisibility talisman. After all, as his magic power improved, the potency of the talisman had also been markedly enhanced. However, if he couldn't take Yuan Yao and Yan Li with him, then he wouldn't be able to eradicate the tracking marks planted in his body by the 4 demon monarchs. In that case, how far would he be able to get before he was simply caught again? Han Li looked on at the gray mountain ranges in the distance as he pondered his situation. According to Liu Zhu and the others, this so-called divine infernal river elixir could be found at the center of the mountain ranges. The demon monarchs hadn't disclosed what effects this divine elixir had, but for a being at the pinnacle of the body integration stage like Liu Zhu to risk his life just to secure this elixir clearly indicated how precious it was. However, seeing as this was the holy land of the Mayfly race, there were definitely going to be powerful restrictions around the source of the elixir, and it was most certainly not going to be an easy task to secure it. All of a sudden, Han Li discovered that the demon monarchs all seemed to be looking at him. All of them wore different expressions on their faces, and it seemed that they were engaged in a heated argument. Mu Qing was shaking her head emphatically, while a cold light had appeared in Liu Zhu's eyes. The white-haired beauty wore an indecisive look on her face, while expressions of the crimson-robed figures remained a mystery to Han Li as their faces were enshrouded under layers of crimson light. Han Li's heart immediately sank upon seeing this. He didn't know what these demon beasts were talking about, but if the discussion involved him, then it definitely wasn't a good thing. Han Li forcibly repressed the unease in his heart as he cast his gaze toward the mountain ranges with a contemplative look on his face. After a long while, Liu Zhu's cold voice suddenly sounded. "Come over here, fellow Taoist Han. We have something we need you to do." Han Li pursed his lips and slowly flew over to them. "What do you need from me, senior?" Han Li asked as he cupped his fist in a salute. Liu Zhu was appraising Han Li completely expressionlessly, while both Mu Qing and the white-haired beauty wore rather strained expressions. "Please have a look at this, fellow Taoist Han." Liu Zhu suddenly raised a hand to offer up the black bead for Han Li's inspection. Han Li faltered upon seeing this object, and he felt that it was rather familiar, so he drew closer to get a better look at it. However, as soon as he focused his gaze on it, black light flashed from the black bead, and a thin beam of black light shot forth from it like lightning. Han Li's heart jolted as he immediately tried to take evasive measures, but the air abruptly constricted around him as if it had been turned into iron and steel, completely immobilizing him. Mu Qing and the white-haired beauty had just raised a hand each to unleash a restriction on him. Han Li's body was immensely powerful, but there was no way that he could struggle free of a restriction conjured up by two body integration stage beings at once. Thus, the beam of black light disappeared into his glabella in an instant. Black light flashed over Han Li's face, following which his eyes became completely vacant, and he no longer tried to resist. Arg, Yuan Yao and Yan Li were naturally extremely alarmed to see this. However, before the two of them had a chance to do anything, crimson light flashed in front of them, following which the two crimson-robed figures appeared. They then immediately plastered a crimson talisman onto each woman's shoulder, and those talismans instantly exploded, transforming into two plumes of crimson threads that enshrouded the two women in the blink of an eye. One of the crimson-robed figures then made a hand seal, and the crimson threads instantly disappeared into their bodies. Yuan Yao and Yan Li felt their bodies go numb before they lost control over their motor functions, but their consciousness were still fully alert. Their eyes were filled with fury and horror, yet they couldn't muster up any facial expressions, thereby giving them an extremely wooden appearance. My body control talismans can control all bodily functions, including even one's spiritual chi. You're both conscious, but you'll be forced to do my bidding as long as I don't remove these talismans, the other crimson-robed figure said in an indifferent voice. The two of them then swept their sleeves through the air, sweeping up the two women before flying into the distance. Following just a few flashes, they returned to where Yuan Yao and Yan Li had originally been situated. At this moment, Liu Zhu cast a series of incantation seals into the black bead in his hand, while chanting something at the same time. Moments later, a low ringing sound erupted from the bead, and it flew out of his hand. It then embedded itself firmly into Han Li's glabella, as if it had become his third eye. Black light flashed erratically over the surface of the bead, creating an extremely unsettling sight to behold. Liu Zhu was quite pleased with Han Li's current condition. This eyeball of a Ci beast was something I obtained many years ago. Unfortunately, this treasure contradicts with the cultivation arts I'm using, so I couldn't fuse it into my body, and I could only refine it into a captivation treasure. Brother Liu Zhu, this brat's cultivation base isn't very high, but he possesses a lot of strange abilities. Are you sure he's under your control? Fellow Taoist Mu and I have already given up on the treasure in the devilish tomb. We don't want anything to go wrong, the white-haired beauty asked as she looked at Han Li with a grim expression. Rest assured, fellow Taoist Lan, Ci beasts are true spirit beings that can compare to the likes of true dragons. A captivation treasure refined using its law destruction eye is extraordinarily powerful, and even beings like you and I would be susceptible to its effects, let alone a deity transformation cultivator. If you don't believe in me, I can use the treasure on you so you can experience its power. We trust you, fellow Taoist Liu Zhu. It's just that I still think it's a real pity that we've had to give up on the treasure in the devilish tomb. In order to secure the treasure there, Big Sister Lan and I have made many preparations in advance, but that'll all go to waste now, Mu Qing sighed with a wry smile. The so-called devilish tomb is merely the burial site for a few powerful devils that unintentionally infiltrated the infernal river, only to be slain by the elders of the Mayfly race at the time. Those devils did indeed possess incredible abilities. As for the treasures you're referring to, those should be their remains, some special parts of which may have attained spiritual nature after being nurtured for so many years by the yin qi in this place. However, those treasures can't compare to the divine elixir. Don't forget that if you consume the elixir, then apply it all over your bodies, the amount of world's origin chi that you control will increase by severalfold. In that case, it really wouldn't be a pipe dream for us to further our cultivation paths. If we're lucky, we could even have a shot at ascending to the true immortal realm, Liu Zhu said with a rare hint of excitement in his voice. I understand all that, brother Liu Zhu, but one of the treasures in the devilish tomb is extremely important to me. Otherwise, why would I have spent so much time and effort recruiting Han Brat to my side? Mu Qing was still feeling a little forlorn. Regardless of how important those treasures are to you, we have to employ some special methods if we want to secure the divine elixir before the Mayfly race reinforcements get here. Only through doing this will we be able to break the restriction as soon as possible and lure the infernal lightning beast away. Alternatively, Do you want to give up on the divine elixir for the treasures in the devilish tomb instead? Liu Zhu asked in a cold voice. There's no way I'd give up on the divine elixir. If I had to make a sacrifice, then it'll have to be the treasures of the devilish tomb. Mu Qing made up her mind in the end. Good. Besides, getting Han Brat to lure the infernal lightning beast away isn't imposing on him a sure death sentence. If he survives, you'll still have a chance to go and secure the treasures of the devilish tomb. One of the crimson-robed figures chuckled. HMPH, you and I are both aware of just how fearsome infernal lightning beasts are. He really will be extremely fortunate if he could survive after luring away that beast. By the way, didn't we only discuss restricting Han Brat earlier? Why have you also restricted the two girls who accompanied fellow Taoist Lan S here? Mu Qing harumphed coldly before turning to the expressionless Yuan Yao and Yan Li. Don't be alarmed, Sister Mu. I transmitted my voice to Dai Zhu asking him to control these two. That Han Brat won't be able to protect the two girls any longer after luring the infernal lightning beast away, so it might be rather dangerous to have them running around on their own. Furthermore, the pure yin qi in the bodies of those two girls can assist me in refining the divine elixir, the white-haired beauty explained in a nonchalant manner. Mu Qing fell silent upon hearing this. Seeing as all three of them have been restricted, let's act according to the plan. We'll break this restriction together, then get Han Brat to unleash his divine devilbane lightning in order to lure that infernal lightning beast away from the divine pond. After that, we'll be able to secure the divine elixir with ease, Liu Zhu said. Infernal lightning beasts are extremely fearsome creatures. Will divine devilbane lightning really be enough to lure it away? What if that fails and we only end up aggravating the beast instead? The white-haired beauty asked in a cautious manner. Infernal lightning beasts love to devour lightning, and divine devilbane lightning is one of the 5 divine lightnings of the spirit realm. How could it possibly be willing to ignore such a luring bait? Liu Zhu was clearly quite confident in his plan. I see, I'm feeling a lot more confident and assured now. The white-haired beauty nodded in response. Dai Zhu then turned to the two crimson-robed figures and said, Fellow Taoist Dai Zhu, the final wall that we face will have to be broken down by you and you purple-blood puppet. We refined this purple-blood puppet for none other than this purpose. One of the crimson-robed figures chuckled. Liu Zhu merely nodded in response. After that, the demon monarch took close to an hour to discuss their strategy in detail, and after ascertaining that every single fine detail had been addressed, they flew toward the Gray Mountain ranges along with Jin Ling and the remaining high-grade demon beasts. Han Li, Yuan Yao, and Yan Li followed along like mindless puppets. A distance of close to 100 kilometers was naturally covered in virtually the blink of an eye for demon monarchs like them. After entering the mountain ranges, the demon monarchs' expressions all became quite grave as they continuously surveyed their surroundings in an extremely cautious manner. However, this stretch of the journey was remarkably smooth. They didn't encounter so much as a single ghostly being, and 2 hours later they had passed through a small portion of the mountain ranges. Thus, they arrived in a massive basin. This basin was several tens of kilometers wide, and it was surrounded by undulating gray mountains. The basin at the center of these mountains was enshrouded under a barrier of black light. This light barrier was extremely dark, making it impossible for anyone to glean the situation beyond it. Liu Zhu and the others paused in midair as they began to carefully appraise this light barrier. It's a good thing that we destroyed most of the ghostly beings here last time we were here. Otherwise, I don't think that leg of our journey would have been so smooth, Mu Qing murmured. But we were taken by surprise by the infernal lightning beast in the restriction, and fellow Taoist Zhu, unfortunately, fell here as a result. That mature infernal lightning beast truly was very fearsome, one of the crimson-robed figures sighed. Let's get started. We'll destroy a small section of this profound light barrier to lure out the infernal lightning beast, and after that, we'll have to rely on you to conceal us, fellow Taoist Mu Qing, Liu Zhu said in a grave voice. As long as I don't have to attack and can focus wholeheartedly on maintaining the concealment formation, there's no way that the infernal lightning beast will be able to discover our presence. However, this formation is very taxing on my magic power and spiritual sense, so I won't be able to keep it going for long. We have to get that Han Brat to lure the beast away as quickly as possible, and as far away from this place as he can, Mu Qing replied with a solemn expression. I'm aware of this. I'll be giving Han Brat a flying treasure from my collection to enhance his speed. Fellow Taoist Dai Zhu, plaster a few of your talismans on him. Fellow Taoist Lan, give him your all-encompassing flag as well, Liu Zhu said in a confident manner. A hint of reluctance appeared on the white-haired beauty's face upon hearing this. Are we really giving the all-encompassing flag to him? It's not a divine spirit treasure, but in terms of defensive properties, it's superior even to some divine spirit treasures. If some kind of mishap occurs, you should be aware of this by now. The safest situation for us will be on in which hand Brat manages to stall the infernal lightning beast for as long as possible. You can just recover the flag after all is said and done. You're the only one among us with a treasure of this nature, which can offer superb protective properties without the need for much magic power expenditure and complex mantras, Liu Zhu said with furrowed brows. All right, looks like I have no choice then. After a long, lengthy hesitation, the white-haired beauty finally rubbed her hands together in a dejected manner, following which a ball of white light erupted and a small silver flag emerged. The flag was shimmering with light, and its faces were riddled with runes. Even at first glance, one could easily tell that this was an extraordinary treasure. The white-haired beauty wasted no further time with words as she pointed a slim finger at the flag. The flag then immediately flew toward Han Li as a streak of silver light. The eyeball situated on Han Li glabella flashed at Liu Zhu's behest, and he swept his sleeve through the air in a wooden manner, sending forth a burst of gray light that swept the silver flag up into his sleeve. After that, he stood motionlessly on the spot once again, and his expression remained completely unchanged throughout this entire process, as if he really did possess no sentient will. Immediately thereafter, crimson light flashed behind him, and one of the crimson-robed figures abruptly appeared before raising a hand. A few muffled thumps rang out, as the crimson-robed figure plastered a dozen or so talismans onto his body in rapid succession. Crimson light instantly radiated from Han Li's body, and his aura became significantly more powerful. Almost at the exact same moment, Mu Qing slowly rose up into the air before descending upon an obscure location nearby. The golden flower disappeared in a flash, and her 2 feet landed on the ground below. All of a sudden, the shoes on her feet spontaneously combusted, revealing a pair of fair and delicate feet amid a ball of white flames. She then swept her sleeves gracefully through the air, and countless specks of light flew forth from within, then disappeared into the nearby space. Immediately thereafter, a black light formation appeared before disappearing without a trace after a few sporadic flashes. An incredible turn of events unfolded thereafter. Mu Qing began to chant something in a delightful voice, and her feet suddenly turned into an azure color, morphing into thick tree roots before this transformation quickly worked its way up her legs. In virtually the blink of an eye, Mu Qing had transformed into a tree trunk from the waist down, and the tree roots that were once her feet had embedded themselves over 100 feet deep into the ground. Countless trees and wild flowers suddenly sprouted from the barren ground around them. Those flowers instantly blossomed, creating a patch of paradise amid this bleak land. The black light formation appeared on the ground again, and every single flower, tree, and blade of grass was perfectly encompassed within the light formation, without any plan overstepping those boundaries. Green spiritual light flashed, and Mu Qing disappeared along with the plants that had sprouted around her. Liu Zhu immediately swept his spiritual sense toward Mu Qing's location upon seeing this, and his eyes immediately lit up in response to what he discovered. Good, your concealment formation really is quite extraordinary, fellow Taoist Mu. As long as the infernal lightning beast focuses its search on this specific area, there's no way that it'll be able to find us. Liu Zhu then waved a hand and flew toward the green light barrier, followed closely by the 2 crimson-robed figures, the purple-blood puppet and the white-haired beauty. Green light flashed, and all of them disappeared into thin air, leaving Han Li standing alone on the spot. Moments later, the black bead on his glabella flashed, and he slowly flew into the air above the black light barrier. After that, he remained hovering completely motionlessly in midair, completely out in the open. The demon monarchs concealed under the restriction each produced a crimson saber. The short sabers were no more than 3 feet in length, and their design was quite peculiar. Following an instruction from Liu Zhu, the demon monarchs quickly injected their demonic power into their crimson sabers. Brilliant crimson light flashed and tremored like a series of blood vipers writhing in the air. The crimson sabers began to emit a low ringing sound, and the demon monarchs were ready for the next step. Everyone failed to notice that the puppet-like Han Li suddenly moved his hand surreptitiously within his sleeves. In one hand, a silver talisman appeared amid a flash of silver light, while 7 or 8 azure beads had rolled soundlessly into his other hand. Han Li hadn't actually lost control over his consciousness, and he'd actually retained his sentient will. However, at this moment, he was rapidly contemplating his situation in a conflicted manner. Back when Mu Qing and the others had immobilized him, thereby forcing him to accept the black thread that flew into his body, he'd thought that he really was in deep trouble. However, much to his surprise and elation, the black thread only caused his consciousness to fade for a split second before it was completely engulfed by the law-destruction eye hidden in his glabella. Thus, his consciousness returned, and Han Li himself had initially also been rather perplexed about this. Only after hearing from Liu Zhu that this black bead was the law-destruction eye of a Ci beast did he realize what had happened. He already possessed a law-destruction eye of his own, so it naturally wasn't strange that his law-destruction eye was capable of nullifying and absorbing an ability unleashed by a treasure of the same nature. There was nothing wrong with Liu Zhu's plan, nor his execution, but never would he have thought that Han Li would possess a law-destruction eye of his own. After a brief period of contemplation, Han Li decided to go along with what they were doing, pretending to be under their control while searching for an opportunity to free himself. However, he was stunned to hear that they were going to use him as bait to lure away some infernal lightning beast. It was the first time that Han Li had heard such a name, but the demon monarchs were clearly all extremely fearful of this beast, and that was more than sufficient indication of how fearsome that thing had to be. He naturally didn't want to act as bait to draw away such a dangerous creature, but if he were to do anything that went against Liu Zhu's will, they'd immediately realize that he wasn't actually under their control. Seeing as they had a captivation treasure like the eye of the Ci beast, they almost definitely had other treasures and secret techniques that they could use to control Han Li's spiritual sense, and he may not be so lucky next time. Even though he could use his provenance true devil arts to lock his spiritual sense away deep into his soul, the demon monarchs could destroy his soul out of sheer frustration, and that would be an even worse outcome for him. Han Li remained completely expressionless, but his mind was racing rapidly. At the same time, he was experiencing the immense spiritual power surging within his body. He didn't know what kind of talismans Daizu had plastered to his body, but he suddenly felt his blood heat up, and the spiritual power within his body instantly increased significantly. That was quite astonishing to Han Li. Even though these secret techniques that temporarily enhanced one's cultivation base often resulted in negative aftereffects, in this dire situation, it wasn't a bad thing to receive a power boost. At the very least, the benefits most likely outweighed the potential drawbacks. On top of that, the all-encompassing flag that had been given to him was most likely also quite an extraordinary treasure, as evidenced by the white-haired beauty to part with it. He didn't know if this treasure couldn't be refined or if the white-haired beauty had intentionally refrained from refining it, but it had no residual spiritual sense marks residing within it. White light flashed, and the small flag appeared in Han Li's palm. He then swept his spiritual sense toward it to find that it was extremely easy to use, and he would most likely be able to easily unleash its powers. Seeing as Liu Zhu had asked the white-haired beauty to give him this treasure, it was quite clear that it would be able to at least be able to somewhat assist him in withstanding the infernal lightning beast's attacks. Otherwise, there would have been no need to even bother with something like this. With this treasure combined with the trump cards that he was carrying, it wouldn't be impossible for Han Li to escape from this infernal lightning beast. The infernal lightning beast was most likely not going to be an extremely fast being, thereby allowing him to open up some distance between it and himself. Otherwise, there would be no point in the demon monarchs using Han Li as bait if he were merely going to be chased down and killed in seconds. If he were to go against Liu Zhu's will and have his cover blown, even though there was a chance he'd able to escape, those tracking marks were a constant pain his backside. As such, it was better to take a risk and continue pretending to be under their control. As long as he could escape from the infernal lightning beast and separate himself from the demon monarchs, he'd be able to temporarily repress the tracking marks, thereby making it impossible for them to ascertain his location. After that, he could find an opportunity to rescue Yuan Yao and Yan Li. They were the keys to his freedom. Even though Han Li's face remained completely expressionless, he had finally made up his mind. Right at this moment, Liu Zhu and the others finally sprang into action. Following a low cry, the crimson sabers were all thrust forward in unison, blasting forth several thick pillars of crimson light that struck the black light barrier with ferocious might. It was quite clear that these crimson sabers had been prepared by the demon monarchs solely for the purpose of breaking this restriction. As soon as the crimson pillars of light struck the light barrier, it created imagery much like stones being hurled into still water. The entire light barrier suddenly began to ripple and emit a faint ringing sound. All of a sudden, a low, beastly growl erupted from within the light barrier, followed by a string of explosive thunderclap that was drawing closer and closer. Liu Zhu's expression darkened, and he quickly withdrew his crimson saber as he yelled, "That thing's coming! Stop!" The other demon monarchs also hurriedly withdrew their attacks. Almost at the exact same moment, Mu Qing's crimson saber disappeared in a flash, following which she made a hand seal. Green light flashed from her tree-like lower body, and she activated the formation underfoot. An enormous burst of invisible power erupted, completely concealing their auras. From a distance, it appeared that there was nothing there. At this moment, black light flashed from Han Li's glabella, and he received another instruction from Liu Zhu through the Law Destruction Eye. Han Li rubbed his hands together in a wooden manner, and a loud thunderclap erupted as a layer of golden lightning surfaced around his body. He then rustled a sleeve to send the small silver flag flying through the air. Without requiring any hand seals or incantations, the flag immediately transformed into black and white spiritual qi that surrounded Han Li, forming a series of yin-yang projections of different sizes. At the same time, Han Li's thunderstorm wings appeared on his back, and he spread them open, preparing to fly away at any moment. All of a sudden, silver light flashed from the surface of the black light barrier, and the barrier was suddenly torn apart by a bolt of silver lightning that was as thick as a water tank. The arc of silver lightning then circled around in the air, and there seemed to be something lurking within it. Before Han Li had a chance to get a good look at it, Liu Zhu's urgent instruction was transmitted directly into his spiritual sense, asking him to flee with all his might. Han Li immediately spread open his wings upon receiving this instruction, and he disappeared amid a gentle breeze. Only then did the arc of silver lightning recede to reveal a black demon beast that was around the size of a horse. The beast's outward appearance was quite similar to that of a wolf, but its back was covered in scales, and it had a single silver horn growing on its head. Its eyes were golden in color, and there were 4 thick arcs of silver lightning revolving around its body. This was none other than the infernal lightning beast that Liu Zhu and the others had been so fearful of. It didn't appear to be all that vicious, but as soon as it appeared, its eyes were immediately drawn to Han Li, who had already fled to several thousand feet away. In fact, it had been drawn to Han Li's divine devilbane lightning. A hint of scorching yearning appeared in the infernal lightning beast's eyes as soon as it caught sight of the golden arcs of lightning around Han Li's body, and after assessing its surroundings to ensure that nothing was amiss, it let loose a low snarl, then crouched down before springing forth as an arc of silver lightning. The beast had unleashed some kind of secret technique to blast arcs of lightning out of its limbs to drastically enhance its speed, and after just a few flashes, it was close to reaching Han Li. Han Li didn't turn around to look behind himself, but he could sense the ferocious beast approaching him from behind. His heart constricted as he cussed internally. This beast was most likely only lacking in speed in the eyes of the demon monarchs. For Han Li, its speed was definitely quite staggering. As such, he didn't dare to hold back any longer. His snowy white wings suddenly began to emit 5-colored spiritual light, and after a single flap, Han Li transformed into a translucent 5-colored thread that disappeared into space. When he reappeared out of thin air, he'd covered an extremely long distance, and he wasn't much slower than the infernal lightning beast behind him. Thus, the two of them sped away into the distance, disappearing in the blink of an eye. A short while later, green light flashed, and the demon monarchs reappeared. "We have to make haste. Han Brat won't buy too much time for us, so let's take care of this restriction as quickly as possible." The demon monarchs brandished their crimson sabers again as they resumed their assault against the light barrier. On this occasion, the pillars of crimson light that shot forth instantly transformed into a series of crimson worms, and this wave of attacks was clearly far more powerful than the previous ones. At the same time, a massive insect projection appeared above Liu Zhu's head. The projection opened its mouth before blasting forth a pillar of black light, and the purple-blood puppet also swelled to several times its original size at the crimson-robed figure's behest. Mu Qing instantly reverted back to her human form again, before also swinging her crimson saber through the air, unleashing several streaks of crimson light that combined to form a massive saber projection, which hurtled directly toward the light barrier. The pillars of crimson light created violent ripples over the surface of the black light barrier, causing it to flash erratically. Within moments, the purple-blood puppet had already swelled to around 10,000 feet tall, and it was like a mighty deity as it summoned its massive purple axe, then swung it down toward the black light barrier with ferocious might. A series of rumbling booms akin to thunderclaps erupted as countless axe projections struck the same spot on the light barrier. As for the white-haired woman, she was only injecting her power into her crimson saber with all her might without unleashing any additional abilities. The restriction barrier was extremely powerful, yet it was still unable to withstand the combined attacks from so many body integration stage beings. As such, a hole with a diameter of over 100 feet was blasted into its surface, and even though the hole immediately began to seal itself, there was more than enough time for the demon monarch's pass-through. "I'll stabilize this opening with a secret technique." Liu Zhu was ecstatic, and he immediately unleashed 8 balls of blue light that expanded drastically as they flew through the air. These were 8 blue pillar treasures, and all of them disappeared into the opening at once. Incredible scene ensued. Blue light flashed, and the opening transformed into a square passageway that was paved with blue crystalline stones, as if they'd been embedded into the light barrier. "I'll be going on ahead, everyone," Liu Zhu chortled before entering through the opening as a streak of black light. The 2 crimson-robed figures glanced at one another before one of them leaped down onto the ground, while the other stomped a foot onto the purple-blood puppet's shoulder. The puppet rapidly shrank down to only several tens of feet in size, then entered the black light barrier with the other crimson-robed figure. For some reason, the 2 decided to leave one of them behind outside the light barrier. The white-haired beauty faltered slightly upon seeing this. Meanwhile, Mu Qing swept her sleeves through the air, and countless specks of light flew toward her from all directions before disappearing into her sleeves. She had cleaned up everything that had been used to set up that concealment restriction. "Sister Lan, are you going to go in with your 2 disciples? Even though the infernal lightning beast has been lured out, who knows what other dangers could lurk in there? With their lowly cultivation bases, there's a good chance that they could perish in there. Jin Ling, you can stay out here." Mu Qing issued a few cautionary words to the white-haired beauty, then delivered an instruction to the golden ape before also flying into the passageway with her golden flower beneath her feet. Jin Ling bowed in response and remained on the spot as it was told. However, the white-haired beauty's brows furrowed as she cast her gaze toward the puppet like Yuan Yao and Yan Li. A cold smile then appeared on her face as she murmured to herself, "I'd be even more worried if I were to leave them outside. You 2, come with me." She made a hand seal to release a gust of gray yin winds which swept up the 2 women before she entered the passageway. Thus, there were only a few beings left behind outside the light barrier. "Let's guard this entrance here for now. If everything goes smoothly, they should be able to return with the divine elixir soon," the crimson-robed figure who had stayed behind suddenly said to Jin Ling. "I certainly hope that to be the case. Well, I'll be following your orders here, senior." Jin Ling was acting in a very respectful manner in the presence of the crimson-robed figure. "He, you must be wondering if I'm the true Dai Zhu or merely an avatar," the crimson-robed figure chuckled. "Surely you jest, senior. My mistress has told me in the past that you're capable of splitting up your soul, so both bodies could be said to be your true body, and both could be said to be avatars as well. So there's no difference between the 2, Jin Ling replied calmly. The crimson-robed figure faltered slightly upon hearing this before chuckling to himself. "Fairy Mu sure knows about me." At this point, there were still 3 high-grade demon beasts remaining outside the light barrier aside from Jin Ling and Dai Zhu. All 3 of those demon beasts had adopted their human forms and were standing not far away from the 2 of them. The crimson-robed figure cast his gaze toward these 3 demon beasts, and he was just about to say something when his pupils suddenly contracted. His hand shot forth like lightning before making a grabbing motion toward a nearby spot in the air without any premonition. A massive crimson hand that reeked of blood and gore appeared in the air above that patch of space, then swelled to around an acre in size before crashing downward with ferocious might. A streak of silver light flashed through the air, and the massive crimson hand was sliced into 2 amid a resounding boom. A humanoid figure then swayed nearby, and a crimson-armored puppet appeared amid a flash of silver light, appraising the crimson-robed figure and the others in an expressionless manner. "Is that a puppet from the Mayfly race?" Jin Ling was rather surprised to see such a being appear here. "Be careful, this is not an ordinary crimson-armored puppet. A powerful being from the Mayfly race has imbued some of their spiritual sense into this puppet," the crimson-robed figure cautioned in a grave voice. That attack that he had just unleashed wasn't a particularly powerful one, but he was still very surprised to see it being dismantled with such ease. He narrowed his eyes and focused his gaze on that streak of indistinct silver light. The silver light was extremely blurry, and even he couldn't see what was lurking within it. That was slightly alarming to him, and he didn't dare to look away from that silver light even for a single instant. Jin Ling's heart also jolted with shock upon hearing the crimson-robed figure's words of caution and seeing the grave expressions on his face. As such, it also focused its gaze on the crimson-armored puppet. Using its spirit eye ability, it was able to do what the crimson-robed figure couldn't, and identified the object within the silver light. It was a faint silver worm that was circling around in midair, creating quite a mysterious spectacle. Jin Ling's brows furrowed upon seeing this. It was unable to identify what kind of weapon this was, but it had to be something like a sword or a saber for it to be able to slice through the crimson-robed figure's attack so easily. You must be one of the Mayfly race puppets that got away, right? Seeing as you were able to escape, why didn't you hide somewhere until we were gone? Are you seeking an early death by coming out to face us here? In that case, I wouldn't mind granting your wish and sending you on your way. The crimson-robed figure chuckled coldly. Letter 1D5F3, letter 1D69B, letter 1D5F2, letter 1D556, letter 1D568, letter 1D556, letter 1D5F0, letter 1D5FC, letter 1D55E. HMPH, if we weren't battling you in our puppet bodies, do you really think you'd be able to defeat us? In any case, none of that matters anymore. Aside from your group here, everyone else seems to have entered our divine pond. Looks like I'll be able to trap all of you here and kill you in one fell swoop, the crimson-armored puppet said in a cold voice. You think you can kill all of us on your own? The crimson-robed figure chuckled at the absurdity of that notion. That's right, with this 5-dragon chopper, none of you will be able to escape from this place alive. The crimson-armored puppet suddenly raised a hand as it spoke. All of a sudden, a loud dragon roar erupted as a silver chopper that was bright and smooth as a mirror came flying down from above before landing in the puppet's grasp. 5-dragon chopper, I seem to recall this treasure from somewhere. The crimson-robed figure stared at the chopper with furrowed brows. Is that so? None of that matters as you'll all be perishing to this treasure soon anyway. The crimson-armored puppet seemed to be unwilling to waste any more time with words as it raised its saber-wielding hand, then slashed it through the air. Jin Ling and the crimson-robed figure reflexively shot forth through the air to take evasive measures upon seeing this. At this moment, 3 chopper projections suddenly appeared in midair, but they were targeting the distance beyond the golden ape and the crimson-robed figure. The 3 high-grade demon beasts in that direction had also adopted defensive measures, but the projections were simply too fast for them to evade, and too powerful for them to withstand as their bodies were sliced in half before any of them could even utter a single sound. After that, the 3 chopper projections abruptly disappeared in a flash. Jin Ling and the crimson-robed figure were both stunned to see this, and Jin Ling attempted to fly into the distance, while the crimson-robed figure swept his sleeves through the air to summon clouds of crimson mist. However, the crimson-armored puppet merely stood on the spot with a derisive sneer on its face, while slashing its chopper through the air several more times. 4 chopper projections came crashing down toward its 2 opponents in unison. The projections didn't appear to be traveling very quickly, but they reached the 2 of them in the blink of an eye. Jin Ling's expression changed drastically upon seeing this as he shrugged his shoulders, following which the 2 short swords he was carrying on his back flew toward the 2 chopper projections as rapid streaks of light. The 2 short swords were then instantly sliced in half before plummeting from the sky as 4 segments. 2 projections then continued onward, seemingly having remained completely unobstructed by the 2 short swords they'd cut down. Jin Ling's heart jolted with alarm as its body blurred on the spot. A chopper projection flashed past, and the golden ape's body was immediately sliced in half, but its remains quickly disappeared, revealing that body to be a mere afterimage. Golden light then flashed over 100 feet away, and Jin Ling re-emerged from thin air. However, as soon as it revealed itself, the other chopper projection was already hurtling toward it, and the timing was so unerringly accurate that Jin Ling had no chance to evade. Thus, its head was sliced off, and its headless body swayed before plummeting from the sky. Meanwhile, the crimson-armored puppet made a grabbing motion toward the silver chopper in its other hand, and a ball of green flames emerged, within which was trapped a miniature golden monkey with a horrified look on its face. The crimson-armored puppet chuckled coldly as silver light flashed from the surface of the chopper, and the miniature monkey let loose a cry of anguish before disintegrating into nothingness within the green flames. Only then did the crimson-armored puppet turn, its gaze toward the other direction. There, the crimson-robed figure had released a vast expanse of blood mist that encompassed roughly an acre of area around his body. The two chopper projections were whizzing through the air like a pair of lethal weapons, but the crimson-robed figure had been able to evade them so far, albeit with difficulty. Green light flashed within the puppet's eyes, and it harumphed coldly before suddenly tossing its chopper up into the air. Brilliant silver light instantly erupted from the chopper as countless chopper projections shot forth through the air, and on this occasion, even the crimson-robed figure was greatly alarmed. He immediately hurtled toward the nearby blue passageway, having clearly realized that this saber-wielding opponent was not someone that he could oppose. However, unbeknownst to the crimson-robed figure, the five-dragon chopper was only truly beginning to bare its fangs now. The crimson-armored puppet made a hand seal, and all of the chopper projections in the air suddenly disappeared. A loud thunderclap then erupted from the silver chopper itself before it transformed into five worms of different colors. All of them circled around in the air before transforming again into five massive translucent blades, then disappearing on the spot in unison. In the next instant, the five massive blades appeared directly over the opening of the blue passageway before descending downward, heading directly toward the cloud of blood mist that had only just made it to the entrance as well. The crimson-robed figure's expression changed upon seeing these giant blades, and brilliant crimson light erupted from its body as it prepared to unleash another ability. However, right at this moment, the five giant blades suddenly twisted outward before disappeared on the spot. In the next instant, they appeared at the edge of the cloud of blood mist like five massive doors, emitting a vast expanse of five-colored light. The five-colored light swept the crimson cloud aside without any impediment, and a horrified look finally appeared on the crimson-robed figure's face. He didn't have time to unleash any other secret techniques, so he could only hurriedly sweep his sleeves through the air while opening his mouth at the same time. A small azure shield, a thin crimson veil, and a round bowl were blasted forth at once. The three treasures were radiating scintillating light, and it was quite apparent that they were all extraordinarily powerful treasures. As soon as they were unleashed, they transformed into three barriers of light of different colors, shielding the crimson-robed figure within. After doing all that, the crimson-robed figure abruptly inhaled before expelling a few mouthfuls of blood essence, then raised a hand to summon a purple talisman. The talisman disappeared into the ball of blood essence in a flash, following which the ball exploded to form a cloud of blood mist that settled over the crimson-robed figure. Immediately thereafter, a suit of purple armor surfaced over his body. This suit of armor was extremely intricately crafted, and there were arcs of electricity crackling over its surface, making it appear as if it were some kind of ethereal, otherworldly treasure. At this moment, the five-colored light had brushed aside the cloud of blood mist and reached the crimson-robed figure. Following a few crisp cracks, the three protective light barriers that had been set up were also shattered in quick succession before the five-colored light crashed heavily into the crimson-robed figure's body. The purple suit of armor flashed with brilliant light, and it finally kept the five-colored light at bay. But only for a split second. In the next instant, the five-colored light began to revolve around the suit of armor, and it was sliced in half at the waist. The crimson-robed figure possessed countless abilities, but none of them stood a chance against this seemingly unstoppable streak of five-colored light. A hint of despair flashed through the crimson-robed figure's eye as over 100 talismans and a dozen or so treasures of different forms erupted from his body. However, his last-ditch efforts proved to be futile in the end, and all of these objects were pulverized in mere moments by the five-colored light. A blood-curdling cry rang out as the five-colored light completely inundated the crimson-robed figure, and not even his soul had been able to escape. A cold light flashed through the puppet's eyes upon seeing this, and it murmured to itself, "The main forte of the five-dragon chopper is its unmatched cutting power. It's nothing more than a laughable delusion to think that you can withstand its attack using those treasures." It then made a grabbing motion, and the five massive blades in the distance transformed into five worm projections before flying back toward it. In the end, the five worm projections converged overhead to form that shimmering silver chopper again, then descended from above. A hint of elation flashed through the crimson-armored puppet's eyes, and it raised a hand to catch the chopper. But the light in its eyes suddenly dimmed, and its body swayed unsteadily as it almost tumbled out of the sky. Thankfully, it managed to right itself amid a flash of spiritual light, but a resigned look appeared in its eyes. It heaved a faint sigh before catching the silver chopper in its grasp again. It gently swept a hand over the chopper's mirror-like surface, and a burst of ringing erupted from its blade. This treasure is indeed extraordinarily powerful, but the rate at which it exhausts my spiritual sense is just as staggering. Looks like I'll have to put an end to everything the next time I unleash its power. The puppet mused to itself with a contemplative look on its face. At this moment, ferocious yin winds were swept up in the distant sky. A vast expanse of dark clouds descended and suddenly encompassed most of the entire sky. Several high-grade ghostly beings descended amid gusts of yin winds before landing in front of the puppet. "Have you done everything I asked?" the puppet asked. "Rest assured, Master, we've set up everything required. As soon as you enter the divine pond, we'll immediately seal off the area using the formation. Even if someone manages to emerge alive from in there, they won't be able to immediately get away, and we'll be able to trap them for some time," a zombie-like high-grade ghostly being replied in a careful manner. "Half of you come with me, the other half stay behind and take care of the formation. Those people have managed to divert one infernal lightning beast away, but what they don't know is that there's not just one infernal lightning beast guarding, but a couple instead, consisting of one male and one female." The crimson-armored puppet chuckled coldly. The zombie-like ghostly being seemed to possess a high level of intelligence, and it wore a hesitant look as it said, "Even though those infernal lightning beasts were left behind to guard this place by the elders of your mayfly race, we'd most likely be attacked by them as well, seeing as we don't carry any badges with us to grant us entry. Don't worry, those people went in ahead first, so the infernal lightning beast will attack them first. All you have to do is sneak over and land the killing blows when the opportunities present themselves. With this 5-dragon chopper alone, I wouldn't be overly optimistic about my chances. However, with this infernal lightning beast to assist me, it'd be strange if any of them could escape this place alive. As for the other infernal lightning beast, it's a pity that it was lured away, but had it not been for the fact that it had been drawn away, those people wouldn't have ventured into Divine Pond. It wouldn't be difficult to defeat them on the outside, but killing them all would be very difficult. But now," the puppet chuckled in a sinister manner. All of the other ghostly beings immediately fell silent upon hearing this. A thought then suddenly occurred to the crimson-armored puppet, and it said, "Having said that, we can't just ignore the infernal lightning beast that was led away, either. We need to send people after it, and if that man it's pursuing is quickly killed, or if something else happens to make it return in advance, then we have to be informed right away through our myriad distance talisman. Rest assured, Master, we've already sent White Ghost after them. She's the one who's most proficient among us in concealment and movement techniques, so she'll definitely be up to the task," the ghostly being hurriedly replied. "White Ghost? Is that the one who managed to escape with only one arm amputated despite facing the most powerful being among the intruders?" the crimson-armored puppet asked. "That's right. If she was sent out, then we should indeed have no issues. Let's go, the intruders have most likely entered the underground palace below the divine pond already," the crimson-armored puppet instructed. All of the ghostly beings immediately heeded its command, and 3 of them entered the blue passageway with the puppet, while the other 2 high-grade ghostly beings remained outside. One of them let loose a long howl, and countless black skeletons appeared from within the nearby dark clouds. And Lee waved a hand through the air, and 7 or 8 bolts of golden lightning erupted behind him, heading straight for a ball silver lightning situated over 1,000 feet behind him. It was none other than the infernal lightning beast that had been pursuing it for an immeasurable distance already. At the sight of the oncoming arcs of golden lightning, the beast wasn't intimidated nor fearful in the slightest. Instead, it immediately opened its mouth to expel a burst of silver light. As soon as the divine Devilbane lightning came into contact with this silver light, it was swept up in a soundless manner before being devoured by the beast. The infernal lightning beast licked its lips as bursts of dull rumbling erupted from within its stomach, and its eyes lit up as if it had just enjoyed a rare delicacy. Han Li was able to take advantage of this delay to open up some distance between himself and the infernal lightning beast. However, the beast wasn't flustered in the slightest upon seeing this. It merely snarled as silver arcs of lightning revolved around its 4 limbs before setting off in pursuit again. And Lee didn't even have to turn around to know what the beast was doing, as it had done the same thing countless times along this chase. This beast was a sliver faster than him, even when he was flying as quickly as he was capable of. So even though he was able to open up some distance, it didn't take long before the beast narrowed the gap again. After that, it would begin to attack him from afar. In the beginning, it would blast bolts of astonishingly powerful silver lightning out of its mouth. However, Han Li possessed his divine devil-bane lightning and lightning robe to protect himself, so he was able to handle those attacks with ease. The infernal lightning beast immediately stopped blasting lightning out of its mouth upon seeing this, and instead switched to unleashing azure claw projection. The projection started off at around the size of human hands, but not long after leaving the beast's claws, they would swell to around 10 feet in size. Several of those claw projections hurtling through an area at once could even suck away all the air in that area, giving one a sense that escape was impossible. If it weren't for Han Li's thunderstorm wings, allowing him to combine wind and lightning movement techniques for short periods of time, he would have most likely been severely wounded by those claw projections already. Even so, the situation was still extremely perilous for him, and he was even dealt a glancing blow by a claw projection not long ago, which had almost resulted in catastrophic circumstances. Thankfully, the all-encompassing flag the white-haired beauty had given him took effect on that occasion, manifesting a gigantic yin-yang projection that nullified most of the power from the attack. Even so, his suit of resentful armor was completely destroyed, and he had suffered some minor injuries. As such, Han Li naturally didn't dare to let the beast draw any closer. Every time the beast drew too close for comfort, Han Li would unleash his divine devil-bane lightning to stall its pursuit. The infernal lightning beast seemed to have realized that Han Li was a consistent source of divine devil-bane lightning, so it wasn't in a hurry to kill him, and merely stalked him as if it were toying with its prey. Close to an hour had passed, and Han Li had already taken this beast out of the Gray Mountain ranges. He had only been able to last this long as he possessed far more magic power than other beings of the same cultivation base. He was proficient in movement techniques, and he had a large amount of divine devil-bane lightning at his disposal. If another deity transformation stage or even spatial tempering stage being were in his position, they would have most likely fallen prey to this beast already. It was no wonder that Liu Zhu and the others weren't optimistic about his chances of survival. In order to break the restriction on the infernal river, Han Li had already used up a lot of his divine devil-bane lightning, and without a large supply of that lightning left, Liu Zhu and the others would naturally be led into thinking that he wouldn't last very long at all. Han Li was keeping a constant eye on the infernal lightning beast behind him while thinking of a way to escape, seeing as the demon monarchs had most likely already broken through the restriction on their end and no longer had any spare capacity to try and track him down. There was definitely no way that he'd be able to escape from this fearsome demon beast through normal methods. The only things he could rely on were his lightning beads, the 2 new types of talismans he'd refined, and his mature gold-devouring beetles. The first 2 of those 3 trump cards were disposable items, so he was planning to use them against the demon monarchs, but unleashing the gold-devouring beetles was extremely taxing on his spiritual sense. As such, he would refrain from using them unless he was in a truly dire situation. Countless thoughts raced through Han Li's mind as he tried to find a solution. He couldn't unleash too many gold-devouring beetles, as the aftereffects would essentially cripple him. However, he could try releasing just a few to impede the infernal lightning beast behind him. The beetles didn't have to harm the beast. All they had to do was slow it down slightly, and he'd be able to escape. As a safety precaution, he could use his new talismans to assist him in that process, thereby even further elevating his chances of success. After much painstaking thought, Han Li finally managed to devise a course of action that was just barely feasible. He immediately took a deep breath and injected his spiritual sense into the spirit beast bracelet hidden on his body. Following a string of resounding booms, Han Li unleashed his divine devil-bane lightning, and just as the infernal lightning beast paused to devour the lightning, he rustled his sleeve to send 3 specks of golden light hurtling through the air. They were none other than 3 mature gold-devouring beetles. The infernal lightning beast had just devoured the arcs of golden lightning with relish when it saw the golden beetles flying toward it. It faltered slightly in response before opening its mouth in a nonchalant manner. An arc of silver lightning erupted forth before splitting into 3 to strike the golden beetles. Thus, the beetles were completely inundated by lightning following 3 loud thunderclaps. However, in the next instant, A hint of surprise flashed through the infernal lightning beast's golden eyes. After the lightning receded, the three spirit insects were revealed, and not only had they not been reduced to dust, they had instead swelled to several times their original size as they continued flying toward the beast. Even though the infernal lightning beast's intelligence couldn't compare to that of a human, it had cultivated to an extremely high level, so it certainly wasn't some brainless buffoon. It had identified that these three beetles were rather peculiar, and it didn't dare to treat them with disdain any longer as it swept a set of claws through the air. Three streaks of azure claw projections immediately hurtled forth, swelling drastically mid-flight before striking the three golden beetles. The claw projections exploded amid a sharp screech, and azure light inundated the three golden beetles. Gusts of fierce spiritual wind scattered in all directions as the world's origin chi in the surrounding area was sucked away by the azure light, and it was as if the entire space there was going to collapse. The infernal lightning beast seemed to be extremely confident in that attack, and it didn't even bother to check the result before it shot forth toward Han Li again. However, a faint buzzing sound then rang out from within the azure light, and an incredulous look appeared on the beast's face. Golden light flashed within the azure light, and the three golden beetles flew forth, reaching a spot that was only several tens of feet away from the infernal lightning beast in just a few flashes. Their bodies were shimmering with golden light, and they didn't appear to have been injured in the slightest. The infernal lightning beast was truly shocked this time, and a hint of ferocious killing intent welled up in its heart. It immediately opened its mouth to expel a swath of silver light that swept up the three golden beetles. The gold-devouring beetles were capable of devouring all things, but they were unable to immediately eat their way out of this silver light. Thus, the infernal lightning beast inhaled deeply, and the silver light swept back to send the three gold-devouring beetles flying into its mouth. The beast gnashed at the golden beetles violently with its sharp fangs, then swallowed them into its stomach. It then crouched down as thunderclaps erupted from its four limbs, and it disappeared on the spot as a bolt of silver lightning again. Han Li had already taken this opportunity to fly over 10,000 feet away, and a peculiar look flashed through his eyes. He witnessed the scenes unfolding behind him. He then immediately flapped his wings and also disappeared as a translucent thread. Thus, it appeared that the Han Li was back to square one. However, the infernal lightning beast seemed to have been completely infuriated by the beetles that Han Li had released earlier, and there was a lot more ferocity in its expression as it raced through the air. It seemed to be intent on killing Han Li now, and its subsequent actions reflected that desire. When Han Li unleashed his divine devilbane lightning again, the infernal lightning beast merely passed through the arcs of lightning without any pause or delay. It no longer had any intention of fooling around with Han Li. Han Li's heart stirred upon seeing this, and he circulated his magic power throughout his body in a frenzy as he traversed through the air as a translucent thread in a wrath-like manner. Even so, the infernal lightning beast was quickly closing in on him, and there were soon only just over 1,000 feet between them. Lightning flashed on the back of the infernal lightning beast, and the silver arcs of lightning intertwined to form a pair of wings. The wings were around 20 feet in length each, and they were completely silver in color with countless runes hovering around them. The infernal lightning beast flapped those wings, and its body turned into a blur amid a rumbling boom. In the next instant, the infernal lightning beast emerged just over 100 feet behind Han Li as an arc of silver lightning, and the projection that was situated where it had been just a moment ago also disappeared on the spot. Shadow movement technique. Han Li could sense that something was amiss, and he turned around just in time to witness the aforementioned sequence of events. His face immediately paled as a sinking feeling appeared in his stomach. He had not anticipated that this beast would possess such a troublesome movement technique. Shadow movement techniques weren't the fastest movement techniques, but they were definitely the rarest and most mysterious. There weren't even all that many people in the world who had witnessed such movement techniques. If it weren't for the fact that Han Li had conducted extensive research on his own lightning movement technique back in Deep Heaven City, reading through many relevant tomes that were sold in the city, he wouldn't have been able to identify that movement technique so quickly. However, he clearly couldn't afford to stand around and wallow in his astonishment under such dire circumstances. As soon as the infernal lightning beast reappeared, it immediately flapped its wings toward Han Li. The wings of lightning then abruptly disappeared amid a loud thunderclap. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this, Yet before he had a chance to react, a loud thunderclap erupted overhead, following which a massive net of lightning came plummeting from above, and it was upon him in the blink of an eye. Han Li's heart jolted with shock, and silver runes immediately surged around his body as he conjured up a new lightning robe, which flew through the air before also transforming into a net of golden and silver lightning to keep the oncoming arcs of silver lightning at bay. Immediately thereafter, azure light flashed around his body, and he hurtled back in retreat to rush out of the area encompassed by the lightning net descending from above. A hint of disdain appeared in the infernal lightning beast's eyes upon seeing this, following which its body blurred once again. Silver light flashed before Han Li, and the infernal lightning beast instantly appeared up ahead. At the same time, it slowly swiped its claws through the air, seemingly in a gentle and completely harmless manner, but Han Li felt as if the claws had been enlarged countless times, affording him no avenues for evasion or escape. Following a few rumbling booms, the surrounding air suddenly tremored before surging violently toward the spot right beneath the beast's claws, as if an invisible yet all-engulfing black hole had appeared there. Han Li's body stiffened before he was drawn forward by a burst of immense irresistible power, forcibly dragging him toward the beast's claws. His face paled even further, but a determined look then immediately flashed through his eyes. He suddenly opened his mouth to expel a small golden sword that was around several inches in length, and it only flashed once before transforming into a streak of golden light that hurtled toward the beast's claws. However, not only did the infernal lightning beast not withdraw its claws upon seeing this, a disdainful look appeared in its eyes instead. The streak of golden light crashed into a beast's claws with a loud clang, only to repel back as a small golden sword as the golden light around it faded. Meanwhile, the beast's claws remained completely unscathed, and they hadn't even moved so much as a single inch. Not only that, but the beast's other paw shot forth like lightning to grab the sword in its claws. A vicious look then appeared in its eyes as its entire paw turned pure silver in color, and it brought its claws together with ferocious might to completely crush the golden sword. Not only were infernal lightning beasts blessed with extraordinary strength from birth, their bodies were as powerful as top-grade treasures. With those two attributes combined, it had crushed countless treasures with its sharp claws. As such, it had thought that it would be able to completely pulverize this small sword, just as it had done with countless treasures in the past. However, the golden sword merely tremored in its immensely powerful grasp, and the spiritual light emanating from the sword dimmed a little, but it remained completely unscathed. The beast had severely underestimated how robust Han Li's azure bamboo cloudswarm swords were. This sword had been refined with several types of rare materials by Han Li, and there were very few treasures as robust as it even in the spirit realm. The sword was unable to harm the infernal lightning beast, but the latter wouldn't be able to destroy the sword in a short time either. The infernal lightning beast was quite astonished by just how resolute this small sword was, and before it had recovered from its shock, a burst of golden light suddenly radiated from Han Li's body. He let loose a loud cry, and the golden light intensified in brightness as golden scales appeared all over his body. At the same time, golden light erupted from his back before manifesting a humanoid projection with 3 heads and 6 arms. The projection slowly extended its 6 arms in unison, sending a peculiar fluctuation running through the nearby space like ripples over the surface of a calm lake. With this split second of respite, Han Li flapped his wings, and a gentle breeze blew past as he disappeared on the spot. The infernal lightning beast let loose a low snarl as it clenched its raised paw into a fist, then lashed out at a certain spot in the air around 300 feet away. A resounding boom erupted as a burst of invisible power exploded, sending an invisible shockwave proliferating through the air in all directions. A humanoid figure was forcibly revealed from empty space by its attack, and it was none other than Han Li, who wore a stunned expression as he stumbled out of thin air. This beast had easily nullified his teleportation technique, and its powers were simply unimaginable to him. Han Li immediately shot back without any delay, and at the same time, he swept a sleeve through the air to hurl a dozen or so azure beads toward the infernal lightning beast. Those were none other than the lightning beads that he'd painstakingly refined, and he'd used up close to a third of his entire supply in one go, so he certainly wasn't playing around. A hint of disdain appeared on the infernal lightning beast's face upon seeing this, and its body blurred again as it tried to unleash its shadow movement technique to evade these oncoming lightning beads. However, right at this moment, Han Li suddenly made a hand seal, and the infernal lightning beast was struck by a burst of excruciating pain in its stomach, as if it were being stabbed on the inside. As a result, it was unable to unleash its shadow movement technique, and this split-second delay was all it took for the lightning beads to reach it. The infernal lightning beast was completely bewildered by the agony in its stomach, so it paid no heed to these seemingly nondescript beads. A loud thunderclap erupted as it half-heartedly conjured up a barrier of silver lightning, then hurriedly inspected its own internal condition. The carelessness with which the beast was handling the situation was very much a welcome sight for Han Li, and his eyes lit up as he made another hand seal without any hesitation. The dozen or so lightning beads flashed with azure light, then exploded in unison at his behest. Initially, only a dozen or so balls of azure lightning appeared. Those then swelled drastically in size as a dozen or so bursts of tremendous lightning attribute power erupted forth. A lightning cloud that was several acres in size appeared in an instant, completely catching the infernal lightning beast off guard as it enshrouded the beast's entire body. Lightning flashed violently amid resounding thunderclaps, and a roar of sheer fury erupted from within the lightning cloud. The beast was naturally proficient at devouring lightning, but this attack possessed power equivalent to that of several body integration cultivators attacking at once, so it was naturally unable to devour such immense and volatile power. Furthermore, Han Li was spurring on his gold-devouring beetles with all his might to eat the beast from the inside, thereby severely debilitating it through sheer agony, and it could only withstand the power of the lightning beads with its powerful body alone. The lightning cloud in the sky put the power of azure heavenly lightning on full display, as arcs of azure lightning flashed amid deafening thunderclaps that were audible even from close to 100 kilometers away.